I think, who are listening online. And we also have a number of people that'll be coming in late. So they've texted and they're running late for various reasons. So we're going to go ahead and start. We are glad y'all are here and we welcome y'all. And this should be a good review of what's kind of going on in our state and what we need to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and Scott, if you'll go up to the podium and we're going to hear from you first. This is Scott Waller, President and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Development Council. Thank you for being with us today.
Okay, is that better? There we go. As I was saying, I'm Scott Waller. I'm President and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. We are the State Chamber of Commerce. We represent business sectors all throughout the state of Mississippi. And interestingly, this issue was something that we kind of delved into on our most recent statewide tour. We do tours all across the state to gather information as it relates to key issues with the economy. And this year, we did a little different. We did it in advance of the meeting so we could get a true feel of where people were on this poll that we did. And one of the questions dealt with childcare. And do you view childcare as a barrier to access to the workforce? And on this slide here, what you can see is that, yes, there was an overwhelming group of people that felt this way. In fact, 88% of all business leaders agreed that access to quality childcare is a barrier to entering the workforce. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that. But first, I think anytime that you have a question that you get this large of a response in a certain way, it's either one of two things. Either you got a really serious issue or you've got a bad question. And I think in this case, it was not a bad question. I think this is a serious issue. This really bore itself out in our September Board of Governors meeting when I went through about 14 different questions that were on this survey with the board. This question occupied the vast majority of discussion time because I think so many of what our businesses are seeing is they have seen people for a variety of reasons that have kind of left the workforce because childcare becomes an issue. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that throughout the day, that some of the work that we're doing right now is going to be highlighted to that point. But I think in reality, that's one of the reasons that this has become something that's moved really very high up the list of priorities for our business leaders all across the state of Mississippi. Now, this survey that we did was a simple question following what was a much more extensive look at the issue surrounding childcare that MEC, along with the Children's Foundation of Mississippi, partnered with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce back to release what was in 2020 a report called Untapped Potential, a look at how childcare is weighing on Mississippi's economy. And there were some things in that report that I thought were very interesting. I wanted to share this data with you real quick. Is that report showed that in Mississippi, we're losing about $673 million annually due to breakdowns in childcare. And this comes in two different ways. It comes into the cost to the employer due to turnover and absences, but it also has an impact on the state's overall economy. Is they estimated about 120 million of tax dollars at the state and local level are lost for those same reasons. Someone's not at work, they're not getting paid, they're not paying payroll taxes. Someone's not at work, they're not getting paid, they're not able to go out and spend money. So the state sees an impact of that in a negative way. But the other thing, the bottom number is the number that really stood out, and I will give the Chamber, the U.S. Chamber, credit for really delving into this with us, is that 41% of those that were surveyed were parents that discontinued their school or training due to this. Now, as it relates to workforce development, that's a really big deal. I know a lot of the work that y'all have done over the past, really 6 years as it relates to but beefing up what we're doing in workforce development, the things that we're trying to do, if we're losing people from those programs due to childcare issues, then we need to really be taking into consideration what is causing that and how do we do that. So this survey that was done in the Untapped Potential report actually surveyed over 300 parents in the state of Mississippi, looking at what they saw as things that were breakdowns. This next slide really delves into that a little bit. If you look at it from the standpoint of what we're looking at is when you're looking at education and training. Now, the idea is to find solutions to create access to childcare to get people in the workforce, but we want to also make sure that those people have training opportunities to move into a higher paying job, a better job, an in-demand job, the stuff that right now Accelerate Mississippi is focusing so much attention on trying to make sure we're doing. So when you consider that of those, the parents that were in those programs, 22% just dropped out, period. You had another 19% that postponed. In other words, they said they're out, but they plan to go back. But again, that's a very high number. And then 18% of those that were surveyed in this category had gone from full-time to part-time because of childcare issues. And then there were 7% that wanted to and never got into the programs just simply because it was impossible for them to do so. Next is where they looked at a 3-month time frame. And there's two things I want to talk about here. Is it relates to how many people missed either work or class due to childcare issues. 55% missed either work or class, an average of 4 days over a 3-month period. Now you carry that out over a year, then those numbers really start to add up. If my math is right, that would be about 16 days that would be missed. That's a lot of days for anybody. In particular, it comes back to that lost number, that 500 million plus that employers are enduring as a result of absences and tardiness. You also saw that 45% of those parents that left early, an average of 5 days there. In other words, they left early. They had to leave because they had to go take care of a childcare issue. And 46% said they had been late getting to work as a result of that as well. So when you consider that time frame, that tells you the impact this has on not only the economy but the workforce. It really does create problems as it relates to childcare. So what are we doing? That's the big question, is what's next. And how, as I mentioned to you, when it was with our board meeting and this was the topic that got the most attention, this was like, okay, where are our next steps? So two things that we're doing right now, and I'll first start with this, is we are working still with the Children's Foundation, the same group that helped us with the Untapped Potential. Since that time, they've put together annual programs focusing on children's issues, childcare issues that are surrounding this, that typically are held every January. But right now, we're digging a little bit deeper into it. So the question I showed you at the beginning, it was the single question. Businesses are now going to have an opportunity to delve deeper in that. I was very fortunate that we were working on this, and I was at a meeting in Washington with a group of my peers talking about actually the two issues that they had in working sessions. And I had no idea when I went to the meeting. This is just a meeting I'd go to as part of this group. They had us break into small groups, and they wanted us to talk about two things: workforce and childcare. I'm like, okay, this is going to be easy, right? Well, really, it's not. But one of the guys in our group said, well, when I was talking about the numbers, he said, what are you doing to dig deeper? What are you doing to understand what they mean by access as a barrier? This survey is what it is. So you'll see a QR code on there. I've got some handouts as well if somebody would like some, but this QR code would take you straight to the survey. And I encourage any and everyone that can to take this survey, because it's going to help us dig deeper into the issue and help us move a little bit further along. So that is the other thing. We'll be continuing to promote this survey throughout the rest of the next couple of months and into the early part of next year to try to get as many people responding as possible. The second thing we did is we realized that we need to spend a little bit more time learning about what's going on in childcare. And as a result, we have formed a childcare task force that is made up of both business professionals and childcare industry professionals to help us dig down in that. We're working very closely with Biz Harris with the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance, who you're going to hear from in just a little while. Kathy Grace with the Graduate Center for Studies for Early Learning at the University of Mississippi is involved. I mentioned the Children's Foundation, others. So this will have a broad reaching. We made sure that we really reached out to all regions of the state to participate in it. We've had our first couple of meetings. We've got a large meeting early December where we're going to bring everybody in and really try to spend a few hours doing some working sessions looking at this. But we feel like this is too important of an issue for the business community to not have a better, number one, understanding. And then secondly, how do we look for solutions? So kind of short term, what we want to do is what are some things out there that we can enhance or improve upon that's available now that would help increase the number of parents who are not in the workforce today, but we can get them in the workforce soon. One of the things that Senator Boyd, you and I have had a conversation about the tax credit that was recently passed. A lot of businesses do not understand that even exists, much less how it works. So one of the roles that we can play is how do we get information out there to make that better understanding. And then from a long-term perspective, what we want to look at is how do we move forward looking at the access to care issue and how do we really find ways to make that improve, make affordability for families. That's one of the things I think you'll hear from Biz here in just a little while is that there's a lot of things out there that are really, Mississippi is kind of behind the curve, if you will. Chad Allgood with the Department of Human Services was on our last call and provided some really good information. And ultimately, what should be the typical average for child care costs, Mississippi, we're running ahead of that at a high level that creates issues for us. And then how do we create, the cost to provide care? How do we create the opportunities for those that are providing it to have things that they can do either through things like businesses taking advantage of the credit, child care tax credit and things of that nature that will help them get things done. So there's a lot of things that are ahead of us as we move forward. So as we're looking at this, we're going to try to really look at every possible option for us to look at how this impacts our businesses, how this could actually be something that we could focus on from a statewide perspective to help improve childcare as we move forward, and then ultimately try to come back with not only the short-term solutions that we think we can do now, but longer-term solutions and really what the role of that is and where are the advantages that we can put in place in Mississippi. So that's kind of where we are with it. That's something we think it's extremely important for us. And we look forward to continuing to work with each of you because there's nothing more important than making sure we have a strong, quality workforce. And if we have people who are not in it because of this issue, we need to be finding solutions.
Thank you so much. We look forward to partnering with you on this and kind of to find more out. There was a recent situation. I actually met with a large industry in my area last week. And as we're looking for solutions, one of the things too, that we're not just looking for solutions for those early child care years, but one of my industries within fall break this year lost 40% of its workforce during fall break. And if you can imagine operating a big manufacturing facility and you lose 40% of your workers, this is a business that could easily expand and do more business in Mississippi, but they've got to have workers to make sure that they're there. So as we look at these solutions, let's not just think about that birth to 4 kind of group. Let's also think about how that we help industry really make sure that we've got a workforce that also has older children as well.
That point, after school care is wonderful, but after school is when school's in session. So that's a very good point. So,
all right, questions? All right, thank you so much. And we look forward to partnering with you and helping us get the word out on those tax credits. Thank you.
Coming up next, we have the Executive Director of Accelerate Mississippi, Dr. Courtney Taylor. Welcome, and I'll let you begin when you are ready.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Boyd, for the opportunity to address this committee today. I have this clicker. My name is Courtney Taylor, and I'm the Executive Director of Accelerate Mississippi. And I'm going to share some data with you all today. Some of it is going to take a minute to settle in. So I encourage, I feel like that's really loud. Am I really loud? Oh, okay. So I encourage you as you review this, I'd love to talk with you further about it, what it means, and then look at some other data points. But ultimately, with every population subgroup that we examine, women, men, disabled, whichever, there are differences regionally that must be explored. So I want to start by painting a picture of what we're seeing in the whole US. So nationally, women specifically between the ages of 20 and 64 work at a rate of 74.4%. That would be what you normally hear as the labor force participation rate. And men participate at a rate of 82.4%. In Mississippi, that number for women is 68.7%, and for men is 74.7%. So we're much closer in Mississippi on who is working and when. Now, interestingly, if you look at what's on the screen, basically the lighter colors right there in the Southeast, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, we're fairly aligned with Louisiana and Arkansas. And women in Mississippi participate at a higher rate than states like Alabama, which is kind of contrary to what we normally think about. Other southern states that you see in the blue are in the 72-73% labor force participation rate for women. That's sometimes can be a little bit contrary to what people normally think of when they think of what women are doing in Mississippi. Now, committee members, you have two separate Excel sheets, one sorted by, they're separate of the packet that you have. One is sorted by county name, and one is sorted by percentage, highest to lowest. And this was really interesting data. And so what you see on the screen right now is the top 5 counties and the bottom 5 counties for labor force participation rate differences between women and women with children. So if you'll look at that, you'll see, for instance, what are the counties? Humphreys, and specifically Humphreys is about 20%, 22% higher labor force participation rate for women with children than women without children. So for committee members, it's one of these that looks like this. It's really interesting. We've sorted this list this way because this data kind of caught us off guard. We know that by and large, women are earning less, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. But women with children, also the research indicates, are earning somewhere between 34 and 49% less than women without children. So they are in primarily low wage jobs across the state. So they may be working at a higher rate, but they may be working 2 or 3 part-time jobs or 2 low-wage jobs to try to make ends meet. So there's some realities there. What you can see in the presentation here and then on the data that you have is that for almost every county in Mississippi, if there is a child under the age of 18, the likelihood that the mother is working goes up considerably. In fact, for almost a third of Mississippi, if there are children in the home under the age of 18, there's a 10 percentage point increase in labor force participation. And only 12 counties in Mississippi is that number 2% or less, the difference. So I just thought that was really interesting as we were looking at this data. You've got Humphreys, Winston, Holmes, Jefferson, they're 16 to 22% difference, meaning there are more women with children working than without children. And you'll also see the inverse for counties like Lamar, DeSoto, Kemper, Tate, and Montgomery, which is on the screen, where women participate at a lower rate when children are present. This is DOL data, and it's different than what we've seen before. So while we're talking about the labor force participation rate, it is also important to know, and this goes to a little bit of what Scott was saying, that according to our Lightcast data, there are 365,049 female head of household in Mississippi and 204 male head of household, which basically are single parents. So you're looking at somewhere around, 570,000 single parent-led households in Mississippi. So when you start talking about work interruptions and things that Scott was talking about, if there's not a family unit there and a partner to pick up the child if they're sick or take care of the child, the only option is to miss work. So I think that the structure of families does have something to do with how they're handling work and what's going on there. So additionally, as I said a minute ago, if they are likely working, but likely working in a low wage job. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. As we try to build a deeper understanding, at some level, at least I believe, that labor force participation is a function of earnings. So if there's not a return on the investment to work, probably not going to work. So I think we have to pay attention to that. We have to break it down by region. I'm not going to do that for you all today. You're welcome. But I'm happy to, as we continue to work through this, to look at that data by region so we can start kind of examining where the problem spots are and what we can do about it. But we do want to focus on our efforts on individuals who do want to work, but maybe can't quit work to, and I'll talk about this in a second, but can't quit work to go get more education or training. And that is what we're going to see from a large percentage of the population if they're working and have children. So let's talk a little bit about wages. We utilize the MIT Living Wage Calculator. So y'all have heard this from me before. We use this calculator ultimately to determine what a job of value is, meaning can a single person with no children have that job and live on their own. So in Mississippi, the living wage is estimated at $19.89 an hour. Now, for a little bit of context, that number was $16.01 an hour 2 years ago. That is really hard to keep up with. It's $4 an hour increase, and I can promise you companies aren't making $4 an hour more than they were making back then. So you have some realities there. As we're talking about this also, Mississippi's average wage in 2023 was $49,135 or $23.60 an hour. So the average wage is well above what it takes to survive. Don't celebrate yet. Now, as we're getting into this a little bit, we put this slide up here so that you could see what MIT uses in their calculations. I am not experienced statewide with each one of these pieces. So childcare may cost more or less than $4,700 a year for a single or for one child, things like that. But this is the same methodology that's used around the country. So we focus on this. Happy to have the discussion if somebody wants to talk about, putting in Mississippi estimates that are different if you have them, but this is the best we have for the moment. Each of these items will reduce the total amount that a single parent must make if they're getting transfer payments or some other child support. So keep that in mind, that every time you add a support, you reduce how much they have to make, which can be a challenge as well. These are estimates and average for each region. You can actually go in and pull up county level if you're curious about your county in the MIT Living Wage Calculator. I highly recommend it. When we've gone through this with some of our companies, it's been pretty shocking to them what it takes for a single person without children to survive, much less somebody with children to survive in this world and this economy. Now, as I go through these next parts, we have to be really careful with our major assumptions until we get to the end, but some data points to pay attention to. 77% of women in Mississippi earn a median wage of less than $49,000, which is $23.50 an hour. So 77% of women in Mississippi are earning less than $49,000 on a median wage. The number I gave you earlier was an average. There's a big difference. Just to be clear, the averages are sensitive to extreme values, while the median provides a better sense of what typical wages are. Medians aren't always easy to get to, and they can be problematic, so keep that in mind. But the state's average wage is $49,135, while the median wage is $37,502. So it is more likely that you're making $37,000 than you are making $49,000. That median wage equates to $18.03 an hour, which is less than the living wage. So again, all this stuff, keep it in mind. You'll see what you're looking at. You'll see that women, the median wage is about $6,000 less than men in this slide right here in Mississippi. Or to put it a different way, women earn about 84.1% of what men earn. And this is not related to parent status. So this is just women, men. There are many potential reasons for this, and everyone has their own perspective. But one thing we know from talking to some of our nonprofit partners and our business partners is this is largely attributed to things like exposure to quality jobs, structure of quality jobs, flexibility to allow childcare, desire, and other similar factors. In many cases, women and girls are steered towards caretaking jobs and away from STEM, engineering, science, math type jobs. As you'll see in a minute, women in these occupations still tend to make less than their male counterparts, which is not unique to Mississippi. Now, what you see here is a little bit interesting. This is a graph showing the women earnings as a percentage of men's earnings. And you'll see it comes together in about the year 2021. And we're actually above slightly the national average for what women make compared to men. And I found this really interesting. And the number specifically is 84.1% for Mississippi and 83.8% for the nation. So we are above the national average for what women make compared to men. This has been increasing since 2020, and that's wonderful. Now, it gets a little bit interesting too when you compare it to other southeastern states. So that's what you have here. In Alabama, women earn 80.5% of what men make. In Louisiana, it's 73.7%. Tennessee, it's 80.6%, and Arkansas is pretty much even with us at 84%. And interestingly enough, if you sort the Bureau of Labor Statistics data by percentages, in Mississippi, women, what women earn is ranked 18th in the country. So that is not a fact that we normally talk about. So I went through the data several times because I was like, that's not, it wasn't what I was anticipating when we started looking at this. Now, the cautionary point here is Mississippi has some of the lowest wages in the nation. So we have to take this with a grain of salt. So women may be doing better compared to men here, but we still need to do more work to continue to get higher paying jobs in Mississippi. Now, to continue the national context, Mississippi is positioned similarly to other contiguous states. And I bring in the national context because I think it's helpful if we understand where we sit amongst our peer states, where we sit amongst the country, so we can see, how desperate and how fast do we need to work on things. But for women in Mississippi, median wages are about $775 a week, which is the lowest in the Southeast region. It's about $3,000 to $5,000 a year difference from our other states. But we're all still fairly similar in this. Now, as you move on, there are some reasons for this, and they vary by region, they vary by family, by individual, all of that. But what you see here is the educational attainment of women, and you'll see that women in ages 18 to 24 are more educated than their male counterparts. So fewer have less than a high school diploma, fewer have a high school diploma only, and more have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree in Mississippi, which is encouraging. Same for 25 years and older, same scenario. Women are more educated than their male counterparts. Now, the takeaway here as I look at this is very simply that we need to be talking to young men about why education is important. We need to get them through their high school diploma at a minimum. And then we need to be talking to young women, really everybody, but young women, about the fact that what you major in when you do go to college matters more than that you are majoring in something. And the data shows that over and over. If women are getting more education but not earning more, that there's an inverse relationship there, and it causes some challenge. We do have significant efforts ongoing to provide quality coaching across the board about high value jobs. That doesn't mean there's not room for improvement. There always will be. We need to be having conversations with kids and adults. It's not just about the sector that you go into. It's about the job that you do when you get there. In the manufacturing example from Senator Board, your production workers make less than your industrial maintenance mechanics and your engineers. And we need to have those conversations. So sector is important, but we got to go one step below that. So what does it mean to be in IT or healthcare or manufacturing or construction? And what specific jobs should you target if you want to make $60,000 or $70,000 a year? It's okay to have those conversations. And I don't think in general, our society has done that for young women. I was one and nobody ever had that conversation with me. So I'm not from Mississippi though, in fairness. But now also as we have these conversations, it's important to understand that we don't control where people go. Some people won't want these jobs. That's fine. But we should still expose everybody to them. Now, next, I started with all of that data because I think it's really important to know where we stand as a state and where we stand compared to other states that are similar to us, and have kind of a level set of information. There's a ton more data out there that I think we should continue to explore. We will continue to explore. But we're going to talk a little bit about the barriers for single women, single families, single men, single women in general. But the female labor force participation in general, we have to understand that everybody's a little bit different. We know women are overrepresented in lower paying service sectors. This is not unique to Mississippi. We know women often act as primary caregivers and they left the labor force during the pandemic and potentially haven't come back, or they've been really slow to return. We know that women face barriers like lack of access in some regions to affordable childcare, elder care, and disabled care. I lump all those together because it doesn't matter who you're caring for. They're still going to create a barrier for you there. Some families are able to work through it, some aren't. We have to be responsible enough to recognize that. And we know that single mothers are working at a higher rate than others, but likely in lower paying jobs. Now, Mississippi isn't alone in this. In all but one state, which is Nevada, women make up at least 60% of the low-wage workforce, even though they're less than half of all the overall workforce in every state. In Mississippi, women make up 71% of the low-wage workforce. Even though we have a lot of positive data points, it's important to understand that women are still 2.5 times more likely than men to hold these low-wage jobs. There's work to be done, and we've taken the approach along with our partners of working to identify opportunities for everybody and ensuring that women get the information in their hands. A lot of times it's just simply a lack of exposure and understanding of what these jobs do and what they pay. The effort is ongoing. It's not perfect, but it is work that I'm proud of and proud to see happening. We know in our office, we have focused on what we call priority occupations, priority sectors. Talk a little bit about the priority occupations or priority sectors here. We know we have to continue to target programs and opportunities that meet individuals, including women and single parents. Single men are facing the same barriers as single women. That anybody who wants to work, we don't want them to have to choose between work and school. So where possible, we have to make both possible. We have a program out as an office called Reconnect that we're working with. We've given out our first award already to Central Mississippi Planning and Development District. They're primarily working with the construction industry to address what's going on there. But in that program, we're working with individuals to pay them while they're in training, quality training that genuinely leads to the next step to get them working at a higher rate. One of the challenges that we found in the labor force is people don't often understand the jobs. They don't seek them. They don't know what it is to work in construction or manufacturing or IT or healthcare. So where we can provide short-term training opportunities to get them exposed and engaged that don't require that they quit their job to embrace it, we want to. We do need to continue to have greater efforts to engage young women and mothers with this and other fields. And you'll hear about some efforts that are ongoing with that. Specifically focusing on high wages. There's an approach in workforce to encourage people to do whatever makes them happy. And that's great. And you should be happy at some level, but you also got to eat. So we have to do what we can to encourage people to engage in things that maybe bring home a little bit more resources than what they're used to seeing. Now, as you see in this slide, wages across sectors are not equal for males and females. We can debate why, but the simple fact is they're not equal. I think oftentimes women don't engage with the higher paying jobs. They engage with the lower level production work for many reasons. So I think as we're working through these things, we have to continue to meet people where they are, single mothers, it doesn't matter what their situation is, and give them access to these jobs. There's a lot of opportunities in the labor force for single parents. They won't be able to access them if they have to quit their jobs to upskill. So that's something we're working on a lot. Excuse me. And we must continue to examine ways in which we can both engage and incentivize workers to upskill in these desperately needed positions across Mississippi, which we're doing regularly. I am happy to address any questions. I'm also happy to pull our data team together and talk about any of these things that may have gotten your attention today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I think some of the takeaway, and I've heard this discussed over the last, I guess, couple of years as we've discussed workforce, is that clearly, and especially in the single parent side, women are in the workforce at a greater percentage, not only in this state, but even compared to the nation, but they are receiving a lower wage, which is a key focus, I think, of your office going forward. Outside of, I know you mentioned a program with one of the PDDs. Can you expound or expand just a little bit on maybe some things that you're targeting going forward for women who are actively in the workforce, particularly single parents, how we can get them to the next level of earning capacity without pulling them out of the income stream because they just do not have room for a break in that income stream?
Yeah, so I think where possible, if employers can pay them to go to training in some capacity, they should. It's hard for people to pick both. We have set aside a funding in the Reconnect program that I talked about to try to encourage more of that, especially for the underemployed. Having training when people can go to training is equally as important. One of the things that, and I say this as a workforce development professional who never did it, is we have to ask them when they can go to training. If you're working from 8 to 5 and you have children at home and you're a single parent, you're not going to go to training at night. And just saying, oh, we'll put it online and you'll do it that way, still not a reality. So that's a complicated issue to solve, but I think it's meeting the individuals where they are and then working very frankly through our nonprofit partners who have really deep relationships in their communities with individuals to know what barriers they have when the training could be. Sometimes it might be a Saturday, sometime it might be a Friday, whatever. But I think adjusting the training to meet the people where they need it to be is critical. I think where possible, having schedules that align to allow people to get enough work during the week. So a lot of your 4-credit, your CTE community college programs, they meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that people can work Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So that allows them to not have to pick between the two. May not make a full wage, may not have a full 40-hour week that way, but you still get a fairly significant wage. I think all of the things that we're talking about for childcare have to be on the table, but I also think we have to look at elder care and those other things as we're moving on to try to address those kinds of things. And then I think we have to be really honest that some people aren't going to work. And if they don't want to work and they're not going to work, that is fine. We want to move on from that. At least we do as an office, and we want to get to the next person who says, I do want to work. And then I think you have two options really. At the K-12 level, I think it's getting to them before they opt out or opt for some of these lower paying jobs, and educating them on what's available so that at least they know, can't control what they choose. And then I think for the adults, it's at some level doing more and having a more cohesive approach to guiding adults in the same way that we're working to do for children, so that they know. And you'll hear from Matt later, and I'm sure he'll tell you some version of when we tell people about these jobs and engage them with these higher paying jobs, women, single moms specifically, they traditionally will take them. So they learn, like, wait a minute, I can do this for $12 an hour. I can do this for $24 an hour. They're not stupid, they're single. So I think more of that is necessary at the local level.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Any questions from the committee? Senator Bryan?
Is there a similar gap in men who have children and men who do not have children?
I'll look at that. I didn't look at that for the purpose of this. Women are studied more often than men, but my guess is yes.
Mm-hmm. My understanding of the workforce participation rate is that it's a fraction or a ratio, and the denominator is everybody between the ages of 16 and 65 who is not in an institution. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the numerator is the number of people who are working or who say they're looking for work. And so among the people that would be in there, and I was focusing on single people because it seems counterintuitive that people with children would be working more frequently than people without children. And so I was trying to think through that. Some of those single women would be like 10th graders,
Potentially.
11th graders that don't have children, not working. And then looking at the other end of the scale, I'm guessing that as women or men or anyone who approaches age 65, they'd be less likely to have children under 18. And it's also the case, and I'm just about to where I can talk about this based on personal experience, but the older you get, you know, the more likely you are to have some physical problems, which would make it harder to work, perhaps. I mean, if there's a range, you could be just completely unable to work, or you could be in a position where work was very difficult. And so, I mean, I'm just trying to think, because I was really trying to figure out who are all these single women that are sitting around not working. And those are two examples of things that came to mind. I just wondered if there had been any attempt to sort of figure out what it is that makes women with children under 18 more likely to work rather than less likely.
Survival, I guess. So we're working to understand this deeper, very honestly. It's hard to find big data sets about when you start separating people out by whether they're single or married. The data is just not generally reported that way. So you have to dig a little bit to find it. Some of our other partners may have some answers to that, but you know, of the single women that I know, they all work. I don't know any that don't work because you have to take care of your family. So I think maybe if you're married or have another support, maybe you don't have to work because you have another support system there, but I don't know.
I was also somewhat surprised to see the dollar amounts for living wages. I think we got an awful lot of people that are managing to live somehow on not having a living wage. I just looked hurriedly, and the starting salary for a school teacher who just went to college and started teaching school is $41,500, and that's pretty close to a living wage. And if you have a child, then suddenly you're unable to
You're
live.
behind the 8 ball.
Did those dollar amounts strike you as being on the high end of, I mean, if you're
The $19 an hour?
the living wage
Yes, sir.
amounts?
Yeah, it's a formula they use nationwide, so I haven't dug into the data, but I do think there are some inputs that are a little bit high. But it's the same standard they use nationally, so that's why we use it.
Well, I guess one of my concerns about the data that we have, which is very useful, and there's been, as far as I'm concerned, it's a very useful presentation. Thank you. But when people refer to the workforce participation rate, that leaves the impression that there are large numbers of people just sitting around living off government benefits or something, and as I've heard it phrased, choose not to work, and on and on and on. And it's a real high percentage of them, and therefore that leads to the notion we need public policy to make life worse for the poor, to give them some incentive to get up and do something. And when you look at the workforce participation rate, I think you've got to keep in mind what the denominator is. It's a very useful statistic, but you can jump to a conclusion from it that's not accurate. And then thinking about the living wage numbers, seeing those, that they too seem to be high. It seemed to me that salaries less than those amounts, I'm not getting paid a living wage, it's almost a pejorative. And nevertheless, it's very useful to have the living wage numbers, but I think you need to keep in mind how that is calculated. So I guess my question, Mr. Chairman, is, don't you agree with me?
Thank you, Senator Bryan. I agree with you all except the denominator. She was supposed to agree, not me. I'm sorry.
But I would not interrupt you, so please.
But the scary thing, to your point, and I think you are 100% correct, is that it looks skewed except for the fact the denominator is everyone who's non-institutionalized civilian 16 to infinity. There is no cap. It doesn't stop at 65 or 85. So in a state where we're about middle of the pack for retiree age, but it also does not adjust for disabled population, which we have the second highest disabled population in the country. So that may help draw some of that.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make it clear, I'm trying to do my part to stay in the workforce.
Yes, and
I
we
need
are
all the
thankful.
support I can get. 27.
So you do count. That's the key to this conversation, Senator Bryan. You count more than you know. Any other questions from the committee?
Can I address one thing with that, though? Just one thing that we have found is the 16 to 19-year-old group in Mississippi participates at a lower rate across genders than in other states. So that drags the labor force participation rate. And then we have counties that drag the labor force participation rate. There's opportunity deserts around the state. So that's important data to watch as you're looking at this, because we have parts of the state that have really high, great labor force participation. And then we do have opportunity deserts, which result in labor force deserts.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And seeing no further questions, Senator Boyd.
We're going to have our next speaker. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I've got a lot of follow-ups on that. Our next speaker is Biz Harris, and Biz is the director of the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start a timer so I don't talk too much, y'all. I am Biz Harris, as Senator Boyd said, the executive director of the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance, or MELA. MELA believes that if we can change the first 5 years of life for Mississippi's young children, that we can change the trajectory for the rest of their lives and also the trajectory for all of our lives. That's why I'm so thankful that you're considering childcare as you think about the workforce participation rate today. Senator Boyd asked me to join you. Thank you, Senator Boyd, to share some data from a report we recently released. We had heard that parents of young children were struggling to find or afford care, and were choosing not to go to work or reducing their work hours, which you've also heard. Data we examined did underscore that childcare and workforce participation for parents were connected. So we dove into the challenges that the childcare market was facing, from supply issues to cost challenges and also consumer price changes. I hope that by understanding the multiple intertwined challenges at play in the childcare sector, that you have the information to make efficient decisions about which interventions can boost workforce participation for most families. And is this the clicker, y'all? I am so sorry. Is this the clicker? Yes, great. Thank you. Oops, did I? Before we begin, I want to extend a sincere thank you to all the researchers whose work we leveraged to create this report. The information I'm about to present is a product of many different trusted state and national researchers' work. You heard a moment ago from Mr. Waller that childcare is impacting Mississippi businesses' ability to recruit and retain their workforce. It's something on their minds. But before we discuss the challenges, the specific challenges with the childcare to think about how to solve the issue, I want to share data that underscores this point. This graph captures data on parents who are not working or working only part-time and highlights parents who are choosing not to work specifically because of family responsibilities. And as has said, families' responsibilities could include a lot of things, but childcare is certainly one of those things. So in the past, you can see here from COVID-19, the spike there, that Mississippi parents, when they had less access to childcare because centers closed or schools closed, then parents chose to leave the labor force. So what does it mean for our economy? More people, as we know, in the labor force means more money for Mississippi. And based on some calculations by Mississippi State economist Corey Miller, a 1% increase in people working could mean a $1.2 billion increase for Mississippi's gross domestic product. They do not pay me to do math, y'all, but this was something that we were put on, and I think it plays out. A 7% increase in people working could mean $8 billion. So if Mississippi's unemployed or underemployed parents who are not, and this goes back to the previous slide, Mississippi's unemployed or underemployed parents who are not working due to family responsibilities make up 7% of the total Mississippi labor force. So if a portion of these parents enter the labor force, Mississippi stands to gain a great deal of money. These data underscore, I think, that if we address childcare for working families, Mississippi stands to gain. The next slides explore the three main challenges to childcare, so that as you consider the market interventions or ways to solve this issue for our workforce, you'll have a basis about how to determine which interventions may have the greatest impact. So the first challenge, of course, is a question of supply and demand. Is there enough childcare available for the children who need it? And the answer, as you can see from these two maps, is no. These maps highlight that Mississippi has enough childcare only for 2/3 of children under age 6. So even if, so there is a childcare supply issue. Even if a county does have enough childcare slots for children under age 6, not all centers offer infant or toddler care or care outside of the standard workday, which I think is very important to note. This means that even if a county does have childcare availability, it may not have availability for the children and the families who actually need the care. And this impacts parents' choices to enter or remain in the workforce. And this graph, I think, reflects on Dr. Taylor's presentation, but it highlights specifically the workforce participation of mothers by the age of their children. We've heard that mothers engage more, or that women engage more, but you can see in teal here that mothers with babies, toddlers, or preschoolers, so with children under age 4, work about 20% less than mothers with school-age children. And this isn't surprising, since children over age 4 have ready available school choices. And as we'll see, there aren't enough options for young children. Without access to affordable childcare, mothers of young children will likely remain out of the workforce until the child enters school. Another population of parents who struggle to work because of caregiving responsibilities are those who work non-traditional shift hours. And Mississippi does have a higher rate of night shift workers than other states. Without adequate childcare for night shifts, parents in these roles will find it difficult to accept or remain in those same jobs. I hope that we're seeing that. Unlike other services, childcare is a necessity for working families rather than a luxury. Normally, providing more childcare slots, so increasing childcare supply or increasing prices, reducing demand, would help balance things out. But economists have deemed that childcare is an example where the market has not been able to correct itself because of challenges within the business model. Why is that? Well, first, we have to understand that childcare in Mississippi are primarily businesses, small businesses. And while there are other options of care, most children are served in center-based childcare businesses. These centers are usually set up in areas where families have enough money to pay for childcare every week. And whether the centers are trying to make a profit or just cover their costs, they have to rely as businesses on the money parents pay to keep running. According to the Mississippi Department of Human Services, childcare center-based programs in non-metro area communities are charging a mean rate of about $640 per month for full-time infant care. Actually, I think that's metro, and $611 per month for full-time toddler care. This, however, as you'll see with the graph, does not actually capture the full cost that it costs the childcare businesses to provide childcare. A recent study estimated actual cost to provide care as nearly $1,000 a month for every age group than what child cares currently report as charging families. So then why is care estimated to be so expensive? And the answer lies in the amount of staffing the service needs. You'll see in purple that this is an estimate of what payroll and payroll taxes typically eat from the budget of a hypothetical child care center. You'll see that payroll and payroll taxes do make up the most significant portion. And this also does not include rent. So if payroll is an issue, can childcare programs just increase the number of children that a teacher serves? That's something we've heard. But this is not a solution, since babies and toddlers need attention of focused and nurturing staff to ensure that each child receives adequate care and is safe. This requires the low staff to child ratios that we have in Mississippi, but low ratios also mean that childcare directors and owners have to recruit and retain qualified staff, and a lot of it to keep their classrooms full. Though payroll is the biggest expense, the pay is very low for childcare teachers. We've talked a lot about low wage roles. Here we see and can compare what childcare teachers make on average in Mississippi with other jobs in similar pay brackets. And the jobs in similar pay brackets are dishwashers and cashiers. Yet, it also compares them with other preschool teachers, the role that is most similar to the work they do every day. And childcare teachers, as you can see in yellow, make the least of any of those on average. So if staff is underpaid, and I'm sorry for this very small chart, but you have it with you. If staff are underpaid, why can't childcare owners just increase pay to their teachers like other businesses are doing as we speak? Many might believe that for-profit childcare businesses are driving their prices up and underpaying staff in order to make a higher profit. But this is not the case. This is a hypothetical budget based on lots of different factors. But as we saw previously, childcare programs have high staffing needs. So you'll see there that they have teachers. They also they're required to have a director and often some part-time support staff. At the current market rate, relying solely on childcare tuition, here's a sample of budget from a very small 4-classroom childcare provider's annual budget. Childcare providers also have typical business expenses like any other business and also have significant per pupil supply budgets. So things like food, medical supplies, and also educational materials and cleaning materials. What you'll see is that given the substantial disparity between income and necessary expenses reflected in the chart, it's evident that this center owner is operating on shoestring profit margins. Since the option of increasing class size per staff isn't allowable or advisable, these owners will have to make difficult financial choices like closing infant classrooms or increasing tuition. In this instance, increasing tuition does seem to be the best option. But if teachers have to, especially if we want teachers to be paid more and childcare owners are struggling to stay afloat. So why wouldn't a childcare provider just pass on the cost to the consumer, parents? Standard practice of businesses isn't available to childcare programs though. A family of 4 in Mississippi, let's imagine that they have 2 children in childcare, 1 infant and 1 toddler. And let's say they make 60% of the median income, which is about $45,000 a year. Childcare costs then exceed 26% of their income. At this price, it's likely that many parents are making the difficult choice to stay home rather than join the workforce. If a childcare provider was to raise their prices to cover their costs, they would then price out even more families from care, and Mississippi's workforce shortage would likely get worse. So you've seen the numbers and data, and now I'm going to get to the best part of my presentation. I'd like you to hear from an actual childcare provider. I'd like to introduce Ms. Lisa Daniel Hollingshead, a Mississippi childcare provider who co-owns multiple childcare centers in the Clinton area. She has 24 years of experience in childcare, multiple degrees in the field, and in fact, her center has also cared for one of your own colleagues, Representative Clay Mansell's own 3 children. Lisa.
Thank you. I grew up in a skating rink that was built by my grandfather in 1971. So the only thing that may make me a little bit more nervous than I am at this moment is if I had my roller skates on up here. After starting our families and careers, my brother and I decided that we would embrace our family's entrepreneurial spirit, and we launched our childcare business. We were the first non-traditional after-school program in the state of Mississippi. So, Senator Boyd, there are some solutions for caring for school-aged children. We opened our childcare business in a skating rink. So there are some creative solutions. The day that we opened, we had 17 children. And today, across 3 locations, we serve about 400 children a day. We pride ourselves in offering the best care available for our children and our families. This is quality, safe facilities and a highly qualified and well-trained staff. Over the last few years, we've had to increase the pay that we provide our caregivers. We are competing with other professions, fast food industries and such, that are paying much higher hourly rates than what we can afford to do. Also, the rising cost of living makes it impossible for families to live on what they were years ago. In 2019, our payroll was about 50% of our budget, and today it's 70%. which leaves very little to cover our debt service, utilities, maintenance, insurance, taxes, and all of the other overhead expenses. After not drawing an owner's salary for the last quarter of 2023 and trimming our budget in every way that we could, we began to have very real conversations about a solution to our budget crisis. We wrestled with the decision because we didn't want to pass these increases on to our families. But in the summer, it became evident that if we were going to keep our doors open, we had to increase our tuition. So October 14th of 2024, we increased our weekly tuition rates between $5 a week and $12 a week, which was based on the different ages of the children we serve. While this helped relieve our budget crisis, it's had a negative impact on at least 4 of our families, which includes 5 children. These families were unable to afford the tuition increase passed to their family, and they were forced to withdraw their children from our program. One of those children is a school ager, an 8-year-old child who's now riding the bus home every day to an empty house. 4 of those children were under the age of 5, and 3 families decided that one of their parents in the home would leave the workforce to provide full day care for those children birth to 5. I wanted to share my story today because it highlights the domino effect that the child care workforce challenges create on all other businesses in the state. I strongly believe that child care provides the infrastructure for working families in every other industry. I thank you all for exploring how you can support and invest in our children and also this critical component of Mississippi's economy.
I told y'all that was the best part. Thank you, Lisa. So you've seen the data and you've heard from Ms. Danielle Hollingshead. And hers is just one of many centers across the state that are wrestling with this issue and making the same difficult choices. The good news is that Mississippi is already intervening in valuable ways in the childcare sector through Mississippi Department of Human Services, Department of Early Care and Education and Developments, through things like the Child Care Payment Program, which offsets the price of care for families, and the Nurturing Homes Initiative, which increases access to care by supporting newly created home-based childcare providers. But if we want to increase the number of parents participating in the workforce, these interventions alone will not be enough. It's my hope that as you move ahead, you'll consider multiple interventions that address not one, but all 3 of the issues we've discussed today: access to care, affordability, and the cost to provide care. Solving for these 3 challenges will not only help more families get to work, but also boost Mississippi's GDP by considerable amounts. If you have to choose one of only these 3 issues, addressing the cost to provide care can have a positive domino effect on the rest of the system, I believe. Thank you for having me. And because when we believe Mississippi's babies thrive, all of our state thrives, and when our state's economy thrives, so do our babies. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? And I'll ask you to be brief so I can keep us on schedule. Any questions? Senator Parker, did you have one? You'll hold it. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Next up, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Human Services, Bob Anderson. Thank you for being with us again, Director Anderson. I know you presented to the Labor Force Participation Committee and have a very involved part in much of this child care discussion. So I will turn the floor over to you at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sparks. I brought this cartoon with me today. Our friend Marshall Ramsey has apparently been paying attention to this dialogue about childcare and the labor force. Maybe we can get it back up here in a minute. I could talk for a long time, but I think this cartoon captures the dialogue completely. Entry to the workforce absolutely requires childcare. Childcare is the ladder that allows parents, particularly mothers, to get into the workforce. Without that ladder, they are not going to be able to climb up into the workforce. So I start my presentation by sharing that with you, and I hope you'll keep that in the back of your mind, that the childcare is the indispensable ladder to the workforce. Now, I want to say a couple of things, and then I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over, for the most part, to Dr. Chad Allgood, who's standing behind me. Dr. Allgood is the director of our Division of Early Childhood Care and Development. He is the expert within our agency, and I dare say the expert across the state on childcare, and he can speak to the issue much more eloquently and with expertise to add to that than I can. But I do want to say just a couple of quick things, and one is we have been raising this issue of childcare, we meaning the Department of Human Services, particularly in my role on the State Workforce Investment Board. I've been raising this childcare issue sort of as a canary in the coal mine, telling folks we got to do something about childcare. We've got to do something about childcare. We've got to pay attention to childcare. I thank you, Senator Boyd and Senator Sparks, for hearing us and for scheduling this hearing. I do think we have a long way to go, but I'm encouraged that our friend Scott Waller was here to tell us that the business community definitely is on board. They invited Dr. Allgood last week, was it last week, to speak to them about childcare, which again, I think demonstrates, his standing in the community. And the last thing I want to say before I hand it over to Chad is that I would remind you, you're going to hear about our certificates. Some folks call them vouchers. Some folks call them subsidies. The payments that we make to families to help them get their children into child care. I want you to remember, every time you hear about a certificate, a subsidy, a voucher, whatever you think of it as, that is someone, and it's more than likely 90% of them are women. That is someone who is in the workforce already because of childcare being made available, or who is in an educational program working toward a degree because this ladder has been provided to get that person into the workforce or into an educational program. So now I'm going to let Dr. Allgood tell you about our program at the Department of Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I do want to thank the committee for having us here today to talk a little bit more about childcare in Mississippi. There we go. First thing I wanted to do is just kind of lay the landscape of what childcare looks like in Mississippi right now. We know that there are just over 218,000 children under the age of 5 that live in Mississippi, and we know that 29% of those children are living in poverty. That's at or below the federal poverty line. We also know that 65% of children live in a home where all of their parents work, meaning that there's no one at home to care for the child. Based on our recent market rate survey that we did earlier this year, we surveyed child care providers across the state. And when we look at those rates, one of the things that we identify is what we call the 75th percentile. What that means is that is the rate at which 75% of all child care providers, what their tuition rates are. Based on those numbers, we can pretty safely say that infant tuition right now in Mississippi, based on the 75th percentile, costs families approximately $9,250 per year. That's based on our metro rate for infants. And I'm going to share our entire rate structure with you in just a few minutes. And then for preschool children, it can cost families as much as $8,250 per preschool child. For a dual income family, that can represent up to 13% of their annual income. And then a single income family can very well see that percentage double. Oh, sorry, that it autoplayed. So you're about to hear from Carolyn Harris. Carolyn is one of the regional coordinators of one of our resource and referral sites. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about the resource and referral sites in a minute. So she just spoke for just a few minutes about the importance of childcare and that perspective. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about. Okay, there we go. I do have some statistics here on the economic impact of childcare. Others that have been here today have talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor the point. I think we've made that. One of the things that I do want to point out, though, is when we talk about childcare, specifically when we talk about teachers, and as Lisa mentioned, the importance of her staff. Our childcare teachers, our childcare providers, they're the workforce behind the workforce. They are the workforce that keeps today's workforce going. And the other thing that's also very important is they're also preparing tomorrow's workforce. So failing to invest really in those people that are caring for and educating our children in those first few years of life, the importance of that cannot be overstated. We do know that the average child care teacher in the nation, average salary is about $13.95 per hour. However, in Mississippi, the average pay for child care teachers is about $9.44 per hour. Also, other studies have said that the average living wage in the US should be about $25.02 per hour. I don't know what you're going to do with the 2 cents, but hey, it's there. And also, now you're about to hear from Holly Whedon. So Holly is the director of the early childhood education program at Itawamba Community College. Itawamba Community College is one of the locations where we have one of our resource and referral sites. So and I don't know if many of you have young children or if you've ever had to leave a screaming child at childcare. I know that's not a fun situation. So Holly, along with Carolyn, and you're going to hear from one other person that's actually a homeschool teacher in a moment, we did some interviews at the Itawamba Community College site just to talk to them about the various issues of childcare and what their perspectives were. I want to talk for a second before I get into what the child care payment program is, which is the program, one of the programs that we run at through our division. I wanted to talk about what we call the child care trilemma. You know, we know that a dilemma is when, or a dilemma, I said that was real Southern the way I said that, wasn't it? The dilemma. So we know what a dilemma is. That is a situation where you're forced to choose between two options, and it often creates some sort of a problem. In childcare, we say we have a trilemma, and it is because when you look at what most childcare providers are faced with, there are three elements: affordability, teacher salaries, and quality of care. The demand for childcare is high, but the demand to keep childcare affordable is also high. And that is something that childcare directors struggle with every single day. To keep the cost of childcare affordable, they're forced to find other ways to reduce expenses to keep the cost of childcare down. Teacher turnover is extremely high because childcare providers, as Lisa said, are having to compete with other industries that can afford to pay their staff higher than what childcare directors can do. You can't not have a classroom without a teacher. And so what a lot of directors have to do is they have to make choices to compensate for that. And often it's quality of care that suffers. And that's going to kind of lead me into the child care payment program and why it's important. So why is child care subsidy important? First of all, in the state of Mississippi, we have about 1,500 child care programs. 67% of those child care providers do participate in our child care payment program, which is our voucher program. The other thing that I think that is very important to understand is that the child care payment program, which is funded by the Child Care Development Fund, represents the single biggest investment in child care that our state has. It represents the single largest amount of funding that our state uses to support child care in Mississippi. In state fiscal year of 2024, MDHS paid over $162 million to child care programs and tuition assistance. Many child care providers rely on the child care payment program to sustain their business income. So the child care payment program, just to give you a quick rundown of what that looks like, we set reimbursement rates by the age group of the child. So that's infants, toddlers, preschool, and after school. We also have a separate rate for children that have special needs. We provide certificates, or you may know them as vouchers. We allow families to choose between what you would consider traditional childcare, which is traditional childcare, you know, when you show up, nobody lives there, or family childcare where the children actually are cared for in the home of the provider. We also have full-time and part-time rates. We also differentiate those rates between metro counties and non-metro counties. We also, in certain cases, we do have families that have to pay a copayment, but we set the copayments at 7% or less, which is what our federal partners have recommended that we do. Any family that is at or below the federal poverty line, they do not have a copayment. Now, to participate in the program, there is an income cap. It's set at 85% of the state median income. But families that, to qualify for the program, families, and that means all working parents in the home, must be employed at least 25 hours a week or enrolled in a full-time educational program or some combination of both. When a family is given a child care certificate, it guarantees them 12 months of service. We do not cut service in the middle of the 12 months. So they get that certificate for 12 months. Now, before that 12-month period is over, we do a redetermination to ensure that they are still eligible for another 12-month certificate. And that is a federal requirement. We must allow for 12 months of eligibility. We cannot cut service before the year is over. Funding for the child care payment program, there is a state match. So Mississippi puts up about $6 million in state match funding, and then we in turn draw down $129 million in federal funding. So this shows the trend of service for the last 10 years of the child care payment program. So if you see back down in 2014, we were serving just under 19,000 kids. There was an increase in 2015, then there was a slight dip. Then we started to see the numbers go up until 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, so we dipped again. But since we have come back from the pandemic beginning in 2022, we've seen those numbers steadily increase. As of this month, we hit an all-time high of 36,000 children per month that we are serving. That costs us about $15 million a month. And that is roughly between 8,500 and 9,000 families that are served. Okay, there we go. All right, so I promised you that I would show you all of our reimbursement rates. So this is our reimbursement rate structure, and these are for traditional child care providers. This is non-residential care. So if you see, we divide this by metro and non-metro counties, and then this shows our infant, toddler, preschool, school age, and children with special needs full-time rates. For infants, we pay a weekly rate of $185. Then for toddlers, it's $175. For preschool, it's $165. School age, $135. And for children that have special needs, $175 per week. This represents somewhere between a 20 to 25% increase across the board in our rates. We are required every 3 years to survey child care providers. And since our last market rate survey, which was done 3 years ago, we have seen a significant increase. And we are required by federal law to set rates at that market, that 75th percentile of the market rate. These are our family child care rates. So these are child care providers that care for children in their home. For infants, we pay a full-time rate of $150. For toddlers, $145. For preschool, $135. School age, $120. And then for children that have special needs, $150. And again, this also represents a significant increase from the last time that we set our rates about 3 years ago. I wanted to walk you through really quickly some of the key funding events for the Child Care Development Fund, because in just a moment, I'm going to talk about some of the other things that we do with our CCDF funding. Back in 2018, Congress increased funding for the Child Care Development Grant to $8.1 billion. That represented a $2.4 billion increase from the previous year. Then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, Congress gave states relief funding for the pandemic. Each state received specific funding that was for childcare and childcare alone, just because the understanding of how crucial keeping childcare going was very evident. In the pandemic, we lost all but 33% of our childcare providers, at least temporarily. They closed temporarily during the pandemic, whether they were sheltering in place. I am happy to say that through a lot of the efforts of the programs that I'm going to talk about in a minute that we do fund with our Child Care Development Fund, plus things that we did with the American Rescue Plan, the CARES Act, and the CRSA Act money, we now have more child care providers in the state than we did prior to the pandemic. In 2020, we received $47.1 million in CARES funding. We created emergency vouchers. The federal government allowed us to temporarily waive the income eligibility, and y'all, within a month, we issued an additional 5,000 certificates. So I think that just tells you exactly what the need is there. We also provided some other grants, like grants for personal protective equipment and some other small grants to help give childcare providers an income, some income, support during that time. In 2021, we received another pot of money through the CRSA Act funding. We received $133.1 million. We used that to drastically increase our voucher program. We were able to open up vouchers to serve more families. And we also did some other support programs, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then in 2022, we received the bulk of the relief funding that we got. We received $199.7 million for discretionary funding. Now that is in addition to the $319 million that we received that we were to pay out to child care providers directly to keep them from going under during the pandemic. This just outlines our CCDF, and again, CCDF stands for Child Care Development Fund allocation. So I mentioned that we put up about $6 million in state matching. We draw down the $129 million. We are required by law to spend 70% of our CCDF money on direct services. So that's your vouchers, that's your certificates. Because of the need in Mississippi, we spend about 85% of our funding on direct services. We're required by law to spend 12% on quality improvement activities. So that is training, coaching, et cetera. And I'm going to give you a rundown of what those programs look like in a moment. And then we spend about 3% on admin costs. So I mentioned the Child Care Payment Program, which is our child care certificate or child care voucher program. And that is, in fact, the bulk of what we use our money for. However, the 12% quality money that I mentioned that we use to increase the quality of childcare, we fund all of these projects with that money. So this includes the Mississippi State Department of Health Child Care Licensing Program. Even though that's in a separate agency, we fund that program almost 100%. They do receive some additional money from fees that they use for supplies, et cetera, but I would say probably 99% of their program is funded with CCDF money. We also have Elevate, which is the new quality support system that we're putting in place. This establishes curriculum standards and we assess programs on quality. We have the Mississippi LIFT. LIFT stands for Learning Investment for Tomorrow Resource and Referral Network. This is a collection of what we call resource and referral sites. Recently, in the past 2 years, we made an investment to increase the number of sites we have statewide. Historically, Mississippi had about 17. At the end of this year, we should have upwards of 50 sites. That also includes 4 mobile resource and referral sites. Now, these resource and referral sites are locations where families and where teachers can come in. They can get free training. They can get free resources that they can use in their program. And I'm going to give you some testimonials here in a minute about some people that have actually been visiting the resource and referrals. We also offer training. Teachers, directors, anybody that works in childcare, they're required to get 15 continuing education credit hours every year. We offer a lot of that training directly through my division, but then also through our partners. We also offer on-site coaching where we have folks that go out on site and work literally side by side in the classroom with teachers and then also side by side with the directors. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is just how tight a childcare program's budget is and how difficult it can be to manage that profit margin. So we actually have a team of coaches. They are business and leadership coaches. They go out and they will work one-on-one with directors on budgeting, on managing their tuition, on running their business, on sustainability. That's why not only is the child care payment program important, but these other programs that I mentioned are as crucial to keeping child care programs running. We also provide learning materials, and then we have family and community resources through the network. We have the Nurturing Homes Initiative, which has been mentioned earlier. That is training and on-site coaching and resources that is specifically geared for family child care. That is a separate type of business model, and it requires some special attention. So Nurturing Homes offers that wraparound service for those family child care providers. We also partner with the University of Southern Mississippi to run the Mississippi Early Childhood Inclusion Center. Dr. Alicia Westbrook, who is the director of that program, is here with me today. So the Mississippi Early Childhood Inclusion Center is the only program in the state that offers training and coaching specifically for working with children that have special needs. And that is exclusively for child care providers. They also have 2 resource and referral sites, which by the way, are the only 2 in the nation that are specifically geared for children that have special needs. They have families that come in, they have play dates where they have the families that come in. Not only do they offer training for the child care community, but really what they do offers a place where families that have children with special needs, who often feel very isolated from other families just because of what they deal with trying to get support for their children, they offer a community for them. And I think that's also very special. We also have the Mississippi Early Childhood Leadership Institute, which is with the University of Mississippi. So they offer leadership training and preparation specifically focused on child care issues. It's about building these cohort groups of early childhood leaders to help them be a voice for early childhood education. We also have the Family Navigator Program, which is a team of family navigators that work with families. So they offer training, which includes parenting support. It can be everything from teaching a new mother how to change their baby's diaper, from how to properly install a car seat in their car. We also help them find employment, things of that nature. And then we also are working on building what's called the My Mississippi Adventures curriculum. So it is a curriculum that is being written by faculty that live here in Mississippi. It is a curriculum that is project-based, which is developmentally appropriate, and it is based on Mississippi culture. It's also it's something that's unique in the nation. So it uses things that children in Mississippi see and experience every day. And as Lisa will tell you, for young children to learn, they need to be exposed to things that they can relate to. So I also mentioned that we received a bulk of American Rescue Plan funding, and we had several projects that we put in place with that Rescue Plan funding. The first one, which was the biggest bulk of what we spent our money on, was our Child Care Strong grants. So we received $319 million specifically for these stabilization grants to go to child care providers. We also used an additional part of our CURSA Act funding because we wanted to ensure that every child care center that applied would receive assistance. And we paid out over $355 million to over 1,100 child care programs. That was to help keep them going for a period of 6 months. And that was what the awards were based on, was their operational costs for that 6-month period. We also expanded our subsidy program. We've used approximately $80 million of our American Rescue Plan money to expand services to over an additional 11,000 children than what we were able to serve without the Rescue Plan money. We launched a teacher payment incentive program, which was over $60 million to over 6,400 teachers. We paid them a bonus stipend every month, as long as they were working in a child care program that served children that were on subsidy, just as a way to try to help alleviate some of the burden from child care providers. I heard from some directors, some said it wasn't a whole lot of help, but most of them were very vocal about how much their teachers appreciated the additional pay. I even had one director that called me and she was beaming because she was able to take her teacher to the bank for the first time ever, and the teacher was able to get a debit card because she was able to open a checking account. And she was so excited because she went to Popeye's Chicken and she was able to buy her lunch with her debit card. It's the first time she had ever done that. Some may see that as a small thing, but for that teacher, that was a huge change in her life, something that meant a lot to her. We also, using American Rescue Plan, we launched the substitute teacher pool, the first of its kind in Mississippi. We had our partners, Wonder School, that did that. When we first talked to them, and I said, look, we need a substitute teacher pool in Mississippi. And they were like, well, we don't do that. I'm like, yeah, but you could. And they did. So, and that has also been very successful. We also have launched the school age reimbursement program. During the pandemic, we had a lot of schools that closed their doors or went virtual. And we had a lot of childcare providers that, out of the sheer goodness of their heart, they kept those children and didn't ask parents to pay any more money. And I mean, they kept them all day long. So those childcare providers that did that, we went back and we reimbursed them the difference, because we were only allowed at the time of the pandemic, because of federal restrictions, to pay them a part-time rate. So we went back, because we got federal clearance using the American Rescue Plan money, to pay them the difference between the part-time and the full-time rate. Then we also launched a scholarship program. We talked about upscaling, the importance of upscaling the workforce. That applies to early childhood education as well. So we launched a scholarship program that over 590 teachers took advantage of. They either worked towards getting their child development associate credential, or we paid up to 2 semesters for them to work towards getting their associate's degree. And then we launched a room refresh program, which was a relatively small grant, but we paid out over $8 million to 1,500 childcare programs for them to purchase supplies for their classroom. So next you're going to hear from Deborah Letson. So Deborah was also at the Itawamba Community College site. She's actually a homeschool mom, and she utilizes the resource and referral. I also think it's important to see that it's not just the birth to 5 population or educators that just work in birth to 5 that are utilizing the resource and referral centers. It's above him.
We come every week. We come for a homeschool class that we actually hold here at the center. And there's about 10 kids throughout the summer. And while they were learning to the parents get entering our homeschool classes and copies and just taking advantage of all the supplies. Very interesting.
So those videos were actually shot at the Resource and Referral at Itawamba Community College. These resource and referrals, they really are hubs for support for early childhood education. And I did mention that we have the resources there, but also around that whole resource and referral network is all of our coaches. And then we also have partners that work to provide support to the early childhood community, to teachers, to directors, and to families that are connected to young children. These are some pictures from the resource and referrals across the state. Particularly, this is, we also partner with Delta Health Alliance and the Mississippi State Extension Service to run the resource and referral site. So these are pictures from that. And you will see children that have been engaged in different parts of the resource and referral. In the top left corner, that is a little girl in elementary school. She was able to use resources to do her science project, which was on oyster gardening. And then in the next picture down, you see there's a little boy. That's actually our mobile resource and referral site. They are transit vans that we've outfitted with early childhood materials that can go out to areas where there's not a stationary site. And then around the rest of the pictures, you see children that are engaged in different activities. We do community events. We host family coalitions at the R&R sites, where we have families that come in. We do a deeper dive with them about their current experiences, how we can better serve them, how we can better connect them to resources. And we do some fun stuff, like I said, with Dr. Westbrook and at other R&Rs. We do their play dates where children can actually come in and play. I want to read you just really quickly some of the testimonials of some of the folks that are visiting the R&Rs. So from the resource and referral in Brandon, Mississippi, the resource and referral has helped my family by having a fun and clean environment to take my grandkids to play and learn. That's Miss Connie Agee. She's a grandmother. In Poplarville, the resource and referral has helped me with having resources available for my own school projects, learning resources for my kids, and books. The center is perfect for when we need an indoor place to play or spend some time doing an activity. We're always inviting people to come with us. That's Jennifer Bryant. She's a parent. In Boonville, as a first-time mom without many resources or friends, this has been a helpful place for me to take my baby. I've been able to get out of the house and also find a place where we can play. It has helped me know what's normal for my child to play with, and the ladies here are so, so sweet. They've helped me with resources too many times to know that I'm doing things correctly as a mom. I'm so thankful for the R&R and the staff. That's Ashley Price. She's a parent. In Houston or Houston, I've heard it said both ways, living in a rural area with limited resources has been a challenge as a parent and a teacher. It has provided services that were not available without an hour's drive or longer. That's Kelly Atkinson. She's a parent and a teacher. And then finally in Gluckstadt, as both the parent and running a preschool, this has been a great resource to me. I wanted to be able to refresh our toys and have new items to learn and play with, but couldn't afford to replace anything. I've been able to check out resources to use for my children and for my preschool students for free, and that has been so helpful to me. And that's Brooke Martin. She's a childcare owner and a parent. Before I turn it over to Mr. Anderson, I just wanted to outline some of the successes that we've had just in the last couple of years. Right now, I mentioned before, we are currently serving an average of 36,000 children per month. That's more than the agency has ever served in the history of MDHS. That also represents an increase in 11,000 children per month since 2020. We've, with partners, we have opened new childcare providers, including new family childcare providers and new licensed childcare programs. We have expanded the resource and referral network from 17 sites to 48 sites and 4 mobile sites since 2020. We've launched an online workforce registry for all early childhood education teachers. We did that in partnership with the governor's office using GEAR funding to kick that off. So we now have a learning platform where any teacher that works in early childhood education can access free online training. And it is, they can take it whenever they want to, their learning checks, their tests, et cetera. And that's available to them, again, free of charge. We've also launched an online learning the registry, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. The learning platform is where they can access any of the free training. The workforce registry is actually something new that we've done. It's called LiftEd, and it's where we are collecting data on our early childhood workforce, the training, the coaching, the quality improvement quality improvement program Elevate that I mentioned earlier. That's where we're collecting data. It also helps us to kind of get a pulse on where we are in terms of the credentialing of our current teachers. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson.
Okay. The last slide, I don't ask Dr. Allgood to advocate for our budget. I think that's what you expect me to do as executive director, but I wanted to reiterate something we started talking about last year. We squeezed as much mileage out of the ARPA money that we were favored with as we could. Beginning in 2022, we spent about 42.9 million, and we spent ARPA money up through September 30th, I believe, of this year to keep our enrollment where it is. And I think what would be a real tragedy is if we had to retreat from where we are right now. We're serving 36,000 children per month. But in order to be able to do that, we're going to need your help in this chamber and our colleagues at the other end of the building. We're going to need about $48 million going forward in order to continue to serve at the same level that we are serving right now. Without those additional funds, we will wind up having to push about 9,000 children over to a waiting list in the next calendar year. Now you might wonder, where did those increases come from? One, the enrollment obviously is much higher than it's ever been. It's at the highest level it's ever been. But there are a couple of other things that have kind of coalesced at the same time. Chad mentioned we do a market survey every 3 years. The market survey pushed our rates up, so we're paying higher rates now than I guess we've ever paid. In addition to the rate structure going up, our subsidies, our vouchers, if you will, are based on the state median income, 85% of the state median income. Well, until very recently, the state median income was $66,637. And that meant the average, or the median, 85% of that was just under $40,000. Well, our state median income has now gone up to $82,331, which means a lot more people potentially will qualify for vouchers or subsidies going forward if we don't adjust our formula. Now, we pay at the 85% rate. We can pay as low as 75, is that right? The feds will allow us to drop that as low as 75% of the state median income. We're looking at whether that is something we should do. It will eliminate some families who would otherwise be eligible. And that's just something we're going to have to think long and hard about, just like you're going to have to think long and hard. This is a big ask. I understand. This is not a small number, and this is not a one-time number. This is a going forward. This is an annual sort of number, and it's a big number. Back in 2022, when we finally started seeing childcare providers getting back up on their feet with some of these grants that we were going to be awarding them, I appointed internally within our agency, Child Care Expansion Advisory Committee, and I tasked them with seeing ways that we could improve the number of families we serve and the quality of care that the providers we subsidize provide to families. Because one of the things I hope you will keep in mind, in addition to the connection of childcare to the workforce of today, is, as Dr. Allgood said, the children in those childcare centers are the workforce of tomorrow. And we need them to have as much of a preparation for school as they can get. They don't need to be just sitting in a room with no interaction, with no opportunities to begin to learn, because the first year of a child is crucial, and the first 5 years of a child's life are really, they set the trajectory for what that child's life will look like, what opportunities will be available, what learning opportunities will be available, what work opportunities, and we need to invest in the next workforce that will be in the workforce in the next 20 years. And so I'm going to be asking you, as I'll be asking the appropriation committees, to support this request for additional funding so that we do not have to retreat from where we have come and tell families, we're sorry, we can't help you. I know I'm pretty much out of the time I was allotted. I'm happy to take questions, Senator Boyd or Senator Sparks, either one of you.
Senator McMahon, I know you had some questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Dr. Anderson, what was Chad's last name?
All good.
So just a couple of questions. So I understand the people, the taxpayers in Mississippi are spending $15 million a month. That's $180 million a year. Is that accurate?
So that is not state money, that's federal money. We use about $6 million in state general appropriations. The drawdown is federal funds. So it's a combination of the state match and the federal funds.
So if we put up 6 million, we're drawing down the balance of the $180 million. Is that number about accurate though? At 15 million a month?
The full drawdown that we can do is 129 million, and we are maxed out on drawdown. We cannot draw down any more federal funds. We are given an allocation every year, and using the $6 million that Mississippi puts up, we use that to draw down the maximum CCDF money that we're allowed to draw down right now. We can't, there are no more federal funds available.
Is it Dr. Allgood or Mr.?
Doctor. Yes.
I'm Dr. Allgood. Thank you. So Dr. Allgood, on the, I just wanted to crunch some of these numbers quickly. So it's $15 million a month. You said we're serving 9,000 families a month, but then you gave a number later that you were servicing 11,000 children a month.
So we have families that have more than one child. Just the 36,000 children, most of our families have at least 2 to 3 children that are served.
Okay, and the childcare voucher, is there a work requirement to receive that childcare voucher?
Yes, sir. So the families either have to be working 25 hours a week, or they have to be enrolled in a full-time educational program, or there's a combination of the two. They can be working and in school to meet the requirements.
So, and then, is there a way to verify? Do y'all
do.
verify that?
Yes, we
To be
check
sure
pay.
that the taxpayers getting a good return on their investment?
Yes, we've checked pay stubs. We've verified that the employer is in fact an actual person or an actual company that they're working for. We do, we have a team of eligibility folks that we do require documentation to be submitted. We require birth certificates for the child. We also require verification that the family, that they are Mississippi residents.
So if it's 11,000 young people in the program, at 15 million, that breaks down to $1,363 a month or $340 a week per child.
It's 36,000 children per month. The 11,000, it represents the increase that we've seen since 2020. So we're now serving an average of 36,000 children per month.
Okay. I'll have to refigure that, but okay. So
This is our-
36,000, and you said that currently the enrollment's higher than it's ever been. Are there any measures to decrease the voucher need to help people move into a different income bracket so that you can decrease that over time? The program continues to grow.
Like you're asking, can we change the amount of the voucher?
The voucher, there's more families in receiving the voucher than ever before. Is there anything we can do to help drive down the growth of to help families move into a different income bracket so they don't have to have the voucher?
Establish better paying jobs or move them into higher paying jobs.
Okay. My last thing, I thank you, Dr. Ogden. Dr. Anderson, I don't want you to close without knowing that I was really frustrated when your previous legislative liaison with the agency left. And I didn't know if you'd ever be able to find anyone that could fill that role the way he did. But I want you to know that Alex Bucklew has helped me every time I've called him about an issue with your agency. He returns my call within hours and has resolved the workforce development issues and helped people get back to work. And I want you to know how much I appreciate his work. And it makes a big difference to me when people answer the phone and return their phone calls and they're effective and efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McMahon. I will say this, when you set high expectations and you tell folks the consequences if they don't meet those expectations, they tend to meet those expectations.
Well, I can tell
Alex
you,
has done a great job.
he's called me in the mornings before 7 a.m. He's called me at night as late as 7:30 p.m. to get to answers to questions. And a lot of times it's just paperwork. It's just paperwork hung up somewhere in the system. And he's helped that. And there was a young man that was about to lose his job and that because of a paperwork error, and then he helped resolve it. And I just want you to know that work is, and I don't know him outside of a professional relationship. Were the times he's helped me, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Senator Parker, you've got questions?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple questions here. So I'm trying to figure where the shortfall of the 47.9 million is coming from. So are things going to continue as they are right now, where you get the same about $129 million a year in matching funds if we put up the 6, or is that program ending, or does that continue on?
It's not ending, but it's a formula. It's similar to the TANF formula, and it's set in place. We will receive the same amount going forward.
So the 129 million, that is our all-in CCDF allocation. At our current rate, at the current number of children that we are serving, we are projected to spend $195 million in childcare vouchers. We've been able to cover that overage with the relief money, which is what we were doing with the American Rescue Plan funding and then the CRSA funding prior to that. Those relief dollars, they
run out. They run out
ended
this year.
and we spent all of that. So basically we're just at a cliff, even maxed out at the 129 million. And by the way, I have to spend 12% of that on quality. So that eats into that as well, into that total. So that's really where the issue is that we're projected to spend 195 million, but we only have the 129 plus we are transferring the max TANF allowance right now, but we're still not going to meet that $195 million.
So, and will the max TANF amount change based on the change in the median income?
No, we can still only convert 30% of our TANF grant to CCDF. And we did that this year. We will do that again next year, but that is the maximum that federal law allows us to convert from TANF to CCDF.
Right, and I know we've had detailed conversations about this before, how we would like to see that percentage conversion change. I think maybe one of these last hearings, you and I had the same dialogue, but that's not something we can do as a state. It's a federal policy that would have to be adjusted if there were a move that was made on
Well,
that.
yes, sir. And I know you're referencing the surplus or whatever you want to call it, extra TANF money we have on hand. One thing that's a little bit different about converting funds to CCDF, we can only do that with the current year TANF grant. We cannot convert TANF funds, even if we have them on hand from last year's grant or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. We cannot convert the prior year TANF money to CCDF. We can only convert the current TANF year grant.
Okay, so you would have a multiplier of a maximum you could get out of that if there were some change in the federal program, though. So there is probably some increase that could be made, but it's not going to be an increase that would plug the $47.9 million hole.
Not in the next year, no,
Okay.
unless Congress were to change the rules as they exist. That won't help us going into 2025.
Okay, and then earlier today, we learned that from The Economist that there's been a 0.8% increase in the labor participation rate over the last measurable period, which was encouraging to hear that. Do you think that any of that increase in the labor force participation rate could be attributed to increased funding in this category?
Well, that brings me back to the caveat that I mentioned when I started. We had 25,000 children that we were serving last year. We're serving 36,000. Each one of those children has a parent who's in the workforce, either 25 hours or more a week, or who is in an educational program. So yes, I do believe that has had some impact on the workforce participation rate. As far as quantifying it, I'd have to get deep into the weeds with the numbers to try to quantify it. But I do think the increase in participation in our subsidy program has led to an increase in labor force participation, particularly for 90% of our subsidy recipients who are moms.
And last, just small question, metro versus non-metro in Mississippi, how do we define that in?
Well, I'll let you speak to it, but my understanding is if it's in a metropolitan statistical area, it's considered metro, like Jackson, I think probably around Memphis, northwest Mississippi is a metro area. I'm not sure. Tupelo, does it qualify?
Sure. So we use definitions from it's Census Data Bureau and Census Bureau data and a couple other things. So when we do the market rate survey, we use that to define whether or not a county is metro or non-metro.
So it doesn't matter the size of the city. In a smaller county, that may not be any metro area.
Correct.
Even you may.
Most
may
of
have multiple
Mississippi would be
cities.
classified as non-metro.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Hickman.
Thank you. Senator Parker actually asked most of the questions, so I think I have like 3 short questions. One, is there currently a waiting list for no?
No, there's no waiting list.
My second question is, if we were to drop the number from 85 to 75, how many people would that take off the rolls?
I really don't think it would not cut our numbers down. We just have that many people that have applied and are qualifying for the program. The dropping it to 75 would be more of an effort to keep us at the 36,000 and not see that number continue to go up.
And is there any way we can figure out, I feel like this goes back to what the director said, probably get you far in the weeds, but what it looks like or what the return on investment looks like if the state actually puts up that $48 million to keep the program where it is?
So, I mean, I think that that's something that we could do. We could look at how many additional families we would serve. But let me just say this, the 47 million is to keep us at our current service rates. So we would have to look at what that mean, like, and I think, earlier, Biz testified about keeping that 1% working. Well, that number was about 11,000 working families. So you say that, our total 36,000, that's about 8,000 to 9,000 families right now. So that's just shy of what that 1% is now. So the additional ask is just to keep us at our current service numbers.
And I guess,
Yeah.
so I guess the question would be, what would be the ROI on keeping us there rather than what we would lose if we went back? And I would like to see kind of what that looks like. And then my final question or request is, do you have a map of where these resource and referral centers are?
We do.
If I can get a copy of that. Thank you.
Sure.
Senator Sparks?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll ask a lot of these questions offline later. But I'm a little concerned about the overall tenor of what we're talking about. And if I'm hearing it wrong, correct me. But it sounds like we're trying to figure out how in perpetuity to continue this program and grow the program. And that is directly the opposite of what I hope Accelerate is trying to accomplish. Because when we talk about K-12, and if I'm wrong, you can tell me, but everything you've talked about today is a math problem. And we need this many to serve this many. I don't know, and the one thing you did touch on was maybe people in a quality childcare are better prepared for the workforce of tomorrow, and I get that. But we've done this with ARPA money. We've done this with temporary money. We have a federal government with a $35 trillion deficit. And if they cut the money out, this program goes down to $6 million. And I'm just trying to be a realist here that high wage, high demand, priority sector jobs is what we're trying to focus on coming out of K-12 and our community colleges for tomorrow's student, today's student, and retraining people to get them there. Because right now we're co-paying this service, and I'm pulling special needs out of that. Special needs children, trying to find that child care, that is a completely different issue. I'm talking about not special needs. I'm talking about the fact that we have children in the state of Mississippi, 2 or 3 in a family, I think that you referenced, that I just want to make sure we're not headed toward perpetuity, because some of the people who fuss about the priority sectors changing and high wage, high demand jobs, we don't want to put people in low wage jobs, because otherwise they rely on a program like this.
Well, let me give you my perspective, because you've heard from the Economic Council, you've heard from Accelerate. Certainly our subsidy program is the last place where we need to be looking to make the biggest improvements. No disrespect to the work we're doing, but if employers get into the game with us, and we have been in dialogue with folks like Ingalls and others, asking them, how can we help you? We have expertise in childcare, but you have to be invested in it. And so we've been talking with employers, and I know Accelerate, and it sounds like the Economic Council is going to be talking to employers about how can you get invested in childcare? Because I think, Senator, I agree with you. Ultimately, employers could replace the subsidy program if childcare was, a benefit of coming to work. If it were something that the employer were invested in, like healthcare coverage, we wouldn't need this program at all. But if we're going to serve the families who benefit from it, yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money to stay at the level. But I am not suggesting that this program should continue to grow in perpetuity. No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying to continue to serve the families we currently serve. And you may well conclude, and you could conclude, that we, exceeded our grasp by using the ARPA money. But I was the last one who wanted to tell a family, we can't help you, when we had money sitting there that we could help them with.
Certainly. And 29% are in poverty, I think was the number that was given out of 218,000. That's 63,000 children. So even at this heightened number, we're at half of the poverty level. So I just wanted to make sure, and nobody may have intended that, but I just wanted to make sure that we're not trying to make poverty a success.
No.
We're literally trying to offer people opportunities so that they don't need a subsidy. That's my hope.
Absolutely. And getting people into living wage jobs will make this program much less necessary than it is today.
And the employer side, and I was going to ask Mr. Waller, everybody's answering the surveys. How many of them want to get involved in childcare may be a good question to put on the next survey, but thank you. And thank you.
Sir.
Can y'all get back to this committee? Because I think there's some confusion among everybody. I'm getting some text can y'all get back to this committee, and we'll forward this out to everybody, Senator Sparks and I will. The number that you are serving right now, where those monies all came from, what you would need if we wanted to give us the different numbers and what those would look like, and what numbers we would need to maintain level, or if we want to cut, what your suggestions would be if we started cutting. Because I think there's a little confusion in text that I'm receiving. So if y'all will be happy, if y'all please get that back to the committee, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, we can
Senator
do that.
McMahon, you got one more question, be quick.
One more question. So currently we're funding this, or we've used temporary ARPA funds, but could TANF funds could be used to support that program as well?
We're using TANF funds already. Yes.
Okay.
We're already doing that.
But what I'm saying, it could be used. So you are using TANF funds.
We can't use any more than we're presently
They are
using.
I think
Understood.
what you're
Thank you.
testifying to, that you are maxed at
You're
this
maxed
level.
out on the TANF fund. We're going to do that again in January.
Yes,
But
sir.
we're maxed out on the TANF funding piece of this already.
Thank you.
Yes. Sir.
Thank y'all very much. Next, we're going to have Matt Williams with the Mississippi Low Income Child Care Initiative. Matt has been successful with doing some pilot programs and upskilling our female workforce. So thank you, Matt.
Hello. I'm excellent. It's so wonderful to be here. My name is Matt Williams again. I'm with, yes.
Matt, real quick.
Yeah.
Guys, there's no air conditioning here. So men, please feel free to take your jackets off, or women as well, but there is literally no air conditioning. If you're wondering if you're hot, you should be right now. So anyway, thank you, Matt. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And should I cut this off at about 3:10? Still trying to maintain. We'll roll with it. All right. So great to be here again. My name is Matt Williams. I'm the research director with the Mississippi Low Income Child Care Initiative. And my whole job every day is to try to figure out what we can do as a public policy advocacy organization and as an organization that creates direct service models. What can we do to improve all the outcomes that we're talking about, specifically for women and specifically in our state for single mom families? And what I wanted to direct you to, you should have in your material a printout of this PowerPoint, but also a brief, well, not a brief, I would say a summary report of a pilot class we just did down in Biloxi, where we partnered with a direct service organization called More Community House Women in Construction. And what we tried to do with this class, and I'm gonna get into more about what we do, but just to give you a preview, is we're trying to put together the package of services that we're talking about. Everything that we're talking about, how can we put this all together to actually take a single mom, in this case on the Gulf Coast, from a low wage job to a full-time job at Ingalls. That's what we want to do. And so this model is what we're pursuing to put that together. And so it's long title here. I'm good at that. Wage Matters. And this is the results from this partnership with More Community House Women in Construction. And just to say a word, I would encourage you, and there's more information in your packet about the Women in Construction program, but just say a quick word. That program was founded in 2007 as really a response to Hurricane Katrina, because at that time on the coast, a lot of low wage work that women had typically been employed in, those jobs were gone. But what jobs were available was construction jobs and jobs in the skilled craft trades. And what we found is that those jobs pay better wages, higher wages. And what we also found is that not a lot of women have a pathway into those kinds of jobs and into the skilled craft trades. And so that program was established to respond to that need. And since then it has built up into being honestly a nationally recognized best practice pre-apprenticeship program. And it's the current Department of Labor grantee. And they're all about trying to move women into what would be called non-traditional work. So this is, without spending too much time on this, I think a lot of the ground has been set for my conversation today. But what we know is single moms in Mississippi need pathways to higher wage employment. And what we know is that they need to earn those higher wages to afford childcare and to achieve economic security, just exactly like we were talking about. And the challenge for our work is that too often what we find is that the moms we serve are not able to just exit low wage work to enter into education and training that might actually lead to a higher paying job that's connected to an employer need in a local area. And that's also free. And so what we find is even when we provide wraparound support services, critical wraparound support services like case management, childcare, transportation, job placement, even when we provide all that, that's just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is moms need to make a wage and they need to make a better wage. And so if we don't figure out how to replace those wages, they're going to stay stuck in those low wage jobs, which again, Dr. Taylor did threw a lot of data out earlier describing that issue. And so I'm not going to throw too much on this slide at you. There's a lot of data out there on this point. But what I wanted to really just say again and drill down again is, and I think it's been established here, single moms in our state participate in the labor force at a high rate. And when we really drill down, when we go into the census data and we look, okay, how many single moms with no spouse present who have their own children living in their home with them below 18 years old. What does that population in Mississippi look like? It's about 97,000 moms. It hovers around that 100,000 area. But the key thing I wanted to leave with you is that just over 80% of those moms, of those women, are participating in the labor force. The other staggering statistic that we sort of wrestle with every day in our work is that the poverty rate for those families, those specific families, is over 40%. It's a high poverty rate. So what do we do? It's a critical need. And again, not to belabor this point, but when we look at those lowest paying occupations in Mississippi, we see that women workers make up the biggest portion. So one thing that we did in 2020 is we said, well, we have to make a difference. So what we need to do is establish a service model that focuses specifically on single moms, that tries to bring together all of these resources offered by our current workforce development system and by that CCPP program that we just heard about earlier from the Department of Human Services, because we have two incredible resources there that if we bring them together, they could do great things. But what we often find in our work with single moms is they don't know about all these resources. And so that case management piece, and Dr. Taylor said something earlier that really stuck with me, and I'm gonna call that out. Apologies to Dr. Taylor if you didn't want me to focus in on this one point. But you said adults need more of a cohesive approach like we do for younger kids. And that's really what I'm talking about right here. I'm talking about a case management model that in some ways is, you all funded career coaches for that high school age population. In some ways, I mean, that's what we have. We have career coaches. We have a team of case managers and they are career coaches for adult learners and for single moms. But those needs of single moms are much more complicated. And so we launched a program in 2020. We called it Employment Equity for Single Moms. And again, what we were trying to do is establish this model that brought all these resources together in partnership at the local level with local workforce development partners, because we know this work happens locally. And I have a snapshot. I'm not going to get into all these numbers, but here's a snapshot of some of our programmatic data. This was from about 3.5 years worth of services. We launched this program right before COVID. And so we pivoted and we created a completely a model that we could use, the case management model and a direct service model that we could do virtually. And we have provided childcare at this point to about 700 single moms across Mississippi. Now I'm going to say all these moms are within the state. I think there's some dots that fell off the map from some clustering issue. So what this looks like for our work, and the point here is the need for childcare is so widespread. And when moms receive assistance, their labor market outcomes improve. And also what this shows us is that the labor market is offering a lot of opportunities throughout the state. And so we have invested about $1.36 million, about $1.4 million in private funds for what we call bridge childcare assistance for single moms who are pursuing higher paying jobs and or training and education. And the way that works is we know when a single mom has a job offer and she has to be there on Monday and it's Thursday the week before, she needs childcare that Monday. So what we try to do is to have a case management team that's very nimble, and we're able to get all the verification that we need and immediately get childcare connected to that mom. And then we do that for a period of 3 months. And during that time, our case managers work really close with moms they're serving to actually connect them to and help them apply to MDHS's child care payment program. And we're a huge fan of the child care payment program. As Director Anderson said earlier, every voucher that's in most cases a mom who is working, participating in the labor force and entering education and training. And when those services are received, it's for 12 months at a time. So it's really stabilizing for parents. It's stabilizing so that they can take the opportunity to enter into a pathway at their current job to get into a higher paying position. They can enter into training and education. So when we look at the outcomes, what we see is a pretty high employment rate. We see about 80% are employed at follow-up. We've been able to move about 37%. It's getting closer to about 47% of those single moms to higher paying jobs. And we've been able to help about 25% of those moms enroll in training and education. And the training and education that we support, we typically are looking at that living wage calculator. We're looking at what opportunities are available in the area. And we're really trying to break down those perceptions we've been talking about all day about, well, why can't a woman and a mom go into a construction training program or go into a diesel technician program? And so we try to take a wage-driven approach. So our case managers take all this information that's available in local areas and try to take an approach that says, let's look at the wage first, and then let's figure out what you need to get in this job that's actually available where you live, that's needed by your employers. Just to say a word about our childcare providers, we have incredible partnerships with childcare providers across the state. We have had about 200 childcare providers participate in our employment equity for single moms program since 2020. All the childcare providers are also participating in the state's childcare payment program. And so the point there is we're trying to transition and help moms connect to this longer term support service so they can take those steps to improve their earnings. We established an MOU with childcare centers. We pay those centers directly. And we really find that childcare provider partners throughout the state are equipped to serve employer and industry needs. And they're really a terrific resource of referrals and outreach to women and single moms throughout the state. And what we're doing in this whole idea is we leverage 3 months of private funding to then help connect a mom to a voucher for childcare assistance that lasts for 12 months. And so we're making an investment where we're trying to maximize the use of that short-term private investment in terms of drawing down that parent's ability to utilize more public funds in the future. And so getting to some of our evaluations that we've been able to do at this point, we've engaged with over 3,000 moms in some way since 2020. And so what we see is the vast majority of moms, when they contact us, they're already employed. That number used to be about 70% were employed. It's going up a little bit. And for the moms, we provide childcare and case management support to enroll in training and education. I thought it would be useful to just say, well, to kind of give you a sense of what we see. What we see is that moms typically opt for short or long-term training, and they are typically going for a certificate. And most of the moms that we've served in training and education are opting for healthcare support, occupational pathways, or other pathways that we see that are commonly selected by women and by single moms that we work with. And that would be, for instance, cosmetology. And you see far fewer women taking advantage of opportunities in commercial truck driving, construction, advanced manufacturing, even though those opportunities are there and oftentimes pay a lot more. So some of the lessons that we've learned: access to childcare, access to case management, I can't emphasize that enough, and career coaching does improve employment and wage outcomes. And single moms mostly opt to work and are unable to go without earning wages to enroll in education most of the time. What's clear is when they do enroll in education, they're most likely to opt for short term, that's 2 years or less, mostly 6 to 12 months. And a lot of the training they opt for, again, is in healthcare and education. But we know that non-traditional occupations often pay higher wages. They offer short-term certifications, and most of the time those jobs are in demand. And they're jobs where women are underrepresented. And what we don't want to do, and what we really try to intentionally not do in our program, is help moms get into training or education that just perpetuates a low wage. We really take a wage-driven approach. How can we get them to that higher wage? So this is the conundrum, as we've said today, but it really is something that affects our work. Single moms just can't afford to quit low wage work to enter training and education. But what we know and what we've studied and what we've gleaned from other states' experiences is that earn and learn strategy, specifically for single moms, represents a really effective strategy, specifically for adults who are stuck in this low wage work, who can benefit the most from these employer and sector-specific training opportunities, but who, again, are unable to go without wages. And I think it's really important to remember. I'm skipping over a lot of this information. It's all in your slides, though, but I want to just in interest of time. But I think just to say a word about what the earn and learn model is, the earn component refers to a wage or a stipend provided to a participant that can be used flexibly. The learn component refers to the curriculum, to the work experience, to the training. And as an adult learner strategy, this is particularly supported by a growing body of evidence. And examples of this approach could include things like on-the-job training, or it could just include things like stipends or wages that are paid directly to participants in employer-driven sector-based training. So I think the important thing that we always remember is students in non-degree training are not eligible for a lot of these kinds of support services or federal aid that other students are eligible for. So there's a great need. In one major study, national study that we've looked at, and this study is linked in the report that you have on the summary of the Earn and Learn class. And by the way, please look at that report because there are great pictures of the graduates of that class, and there are some quotes from them that are really inspiring. But what we saw in this economic impact study is that if we invest in wage stipends for adult learners in non-degree training, we do see that it yields a positive economic return. In this study, the researchers found that the retention rate was double that of participants who did not receive the stipend. And they found that receiving the stipend actually had a statistically significant higher graduation rate for participants. Participants experienced a higher certification completion rate, and their 4-month job attainment rate was higher. And ultimately what they found is for the $500,000 investment in wage replacement stipends for that study's learners that they looked at would result in about $2.28 million more in graduate earnings. And that was based on an 80% employment rate. And I think it's studies like that that are the reason that some major cities actually have invested some of their ARPA money in earn and learn strategies for specific targeted populations. Okay, I'm going to take you, I know that was a lot thrown at you quickly. Sorry about that. But I'm going to take you away from that statewide perspective, away from the Employment Equity for Single Moms program that we were just talking to you about, where we're working statewide, to a local direct service example that I mentioned at the beginning. And this is Moore Community House Women in Construction in Biloxi, Mississippi. Just to also say, Moore Community House, if y'all are not familiar with that, it is a Methodist mission agency. It's been in the East Biloxi community since 1924. They just celebrated their 100th anniversary. And so it is an institution down in Biloxi. And again, since about 2007, they've been doing the Women in Construction program. So the program down on the coast, Women in Construction, it's a general construction industry class that lasts about 8 weeks. It leads to industry recognized credentials in general construction. And this includes the industry recognized curriculum, OSHA safety, equipment and operating certificates, and other specific types of certifications that are needed to enter general construction employment. So that program for a while has been providing payments directly for its participants' childcare and transportation costs. It has also really had a strong track record on the coast for connecting moms and women to jobs in the trades. So for the first time in May of 2024, the program, through a partnership with my organization, offered wages to 23 students. And we paid them $12 per hour for 30 hours of classroom training a week. And we paid them a one-time lump sum at the end of the training that was equivalent to about 2 weeks of earnings. And most participants were single mothers, and most participants were the primary earners for their family. And I want to tell you a little bit more about this. So our whole question here was, okay, well, how can we, if we know that we struggle to move single moms to higher paying jobs because they're so overwhelmingly stuck in low wage work, what can we do? Well, and if we provide a wage, will that actually allow them to leave that low wage work and pursue this opportunity? And will that be a successful journey? Well, let me just tell you, we're still learning, but the preliminary results suggest that this is going to be an effective strategy. Now, I offer this to you as something, a body of evidence that we're going to continue to build on. But what we were able to do is about 60% of those students who were employed prior to enrolling in the training were actually able to leave their job and pursue this training. And we're going to keep tracking this data and building this data set. But that's a pretty telling finding that suggests that it is possible to allow women to leave that low wage work to pursue these higher wage opportunities. The types of jobs that women were leaving were most commonly jobs in like environmental services, custodial services, jobs in food service, jobs in healthcare support occupations. So when we, excuse me, sorry about that. So when we asked students, what was the reason that they were able to attend class? And when we forced them to pick between all these support services, because students really didn't want to pick between, they really are saying, well, we need childcare, we need transportation assistance, we need job placement, we need the wage. But when through a series of structured questions and through a survey that we did, we really wanted to try to glean if that hourly wage made the difference. And I can tell you through a series of structured questions and through a series of trying to remove our kind of bias going into this, what we found consistently is that the hourly wage that single moms received was the most important factor for supporting their ability to actually leave their low wage job and get into the training. And then I told you at the beginning, most of the participants were single moms. When we asked these questions about work supports, again, we're not trying to say which work support is the most important. We don't want to put any of these against each other. They're all critical. But when we're really trying to learn from this, what is going to make the difference? What we see for single moms particularly is that the hourly wage got more than 56% of them actually there. They wouldn't be able to do it. And the childcare assistance and the transportation assistance were equally critical. And so what this tells us is that package of services is really what makes the difference in a single mom's ability to leave a low wage job and get into an opportunity where she can actually earn higher wages. And so I think it's important to say one of the survey questions we asked moms in this pilot class, and that we'll ask again as we can continue, we're going to do another pilot in 2025. About 80% had never participated in training or education. And so the services that we put together actually allowed a lot of them to get into training for the first time. Participants, when we asked them why they hadn't been in training or education in the past, I have some sort of reasons here listed: personal care responsibilities, lack of childcare, the inability to go without income, to attend training, costs and lack of transportation, a lack of personal time. So reasons that you would think, but childcare and personal care responsibilities are really high on that list. And when we asked the few students more questions about the previous training and education that they did get, what was really overwhelmingly clear was that they didn't get a job in the occupation they got training for previously, and that even those who did get a job, the vast majority didn't get to the wage outcome they needed to actually change their circumstances. This is just a statewide snapshot to give you an idea of what we're talking about when I say we're trying to create a pathway into non-traditional work. over on the left is just pulling out some statewide statistics on the kind of occupations that the participants in Women in Construction are actually leaving. And the table on the right is the kind of occupations that they're trying to get into. And so you can see there that the types of occupations they're leaving are where a lot of women are concentrated and where wages are low. And the types of occupations they're trying to get into are where fewer women are concentrated, but where the wages are actually higher and may present an opportunity to get closer to a living wage. And when we actually talked to the staff and interviewed the staff and got their feedback, a lot of what they observed, I think, is really important for us to consider as we move forward with this work. And what I wanted to share with you all, which is the staff attributed a significant portion of that increased application rate they saw, and I'll show you a graph on that here just in a second, to that hourly wage that was advertised before the class started. That's the other thing that's critical to remember. Before this class was started, we were able to advertise. You'll get a wage during training, childcare, transportation stipend, case management, job placement assistance. And so that kind of advertising opened that opportunity up for a lot of moms. WNC staff observed that the training brought a lot more people to the table and that it has actually increased prospective interest. I think the biggest takeaway when we looked at the data was that the retention rate was 85% in the Earn and Learn class compared to about 64% for the previous 4 comparable classes. And you can see in this chart, the number of applications just grew. When we advertised the wage, when we advertised childcare, what we advertised was you actually have the supports, the package of supports you need to be able to confidently take the step into this program. I think that's why we are seeing this higher number of applications received. And then when we looked at what it did to actual enrollment, we see that enrollment was steadily increasing over the last few classes, but that enrollment increased significantly with this Earn and Learn class where we combined all of these services we're talking about, and the retention rate significantly improved. And so again, we're going to continue to build this data set. And what we can see though from these preliminary results is that when we offer this package of services, we can actually achieve a really high training completion rate for single moms particularly. And we are planning a 2025 Earn and Learn class. But what this model really does is it enables low wage working single moms to quit work, to not worry about the immediate loss of wages, to have childcare and transportation support. And it also enabled a wide range of women interested in the trades to take advantage of a supported pathway into that work. And I can say, let me go back here really quick. Some of the early results I mentioned here, the staff at Women in Construction, they are still collecting their employment placement data. It's been about 4 months, but I'm very happy to report that over half the class already has jobs in the trades. About, I think, 4 or 6 of them are already employed out at Ingalls on the Gulf Coast. And that is an example of this program taking moms from low-wage jobs fully through a journey, through training and education, to a job at Ingalls where they are going to have their life transformed. And I mentioned earlier, Moore Community House had their 100th anniversary in East Biloxi a couple weeks ago. And one of the graduates of the Women in Construction program from a couple of years ago, who actually didn't get to take advantage of the wage portion, but received childcare, transportation, and training. She's a shift supervisor at Ingalls. And she shared how that program literally changed her life. And so I wanted to leave you with some recommendations that we ponder and that we want to consider and that we base specifically on this work. And I think you can see these here, and in the interest of time, I'll say that I'd be happy to follow up on any of these kind of ideas that we have about really doing what we're doing with the ESM, maximizing the resources that we already have and just bringing them together in a way and targeting them to single moms we serve in a way that can be really successful. And I also want to say, even though this presentation and the report that you have is all about trying to get moms, is partnering with a program where they're trying to get moms into a non-traditional occupation. Most moms we support are going into what would be considered traditional occupations for women. And so we want to say on that point, we're very supportive of those pathways. We just think those pathways need to have childcare and need to have other things built into them. And they need to be focused on, again, that wage goal, that higher wage goal. And on that point, we are partnering right now with Singing River Healthcare Academy down in Pascagoula. They have a fantastic program. They're providing an apprenticeship and earn and learn model where they're really making all of this possible. And we're going to do the childcare for their participants. And so we're going to hope to get a lot of moms connected to LPN and RN jobs through that program. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Matt, you've presented a lot of information. I think you could qualify as the FedEx man, giving this as fast as you just did it. You did a great job. In the interest of time, I'm going to let everybody take a 5-minute break. If you have questions, come find Matt, because this is a lot of really great information that I think we may follow up with.
Please.
And when you come back, we're going to adjust the schedule just a little bit, but everybody take 5 minutes, stand up, and then get back here in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me so much. I really appreciate you.
Okay, y'all, 1 minute. Come on back in.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, Lonnie, I'm gonna have you go ahead and start. They'll come back in as we start, so that'll be fine. Okay, y'all, we're gonna have Lonnie Edgar, who's the Deputy Director of PEER, and he is going to give us an overview. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee and everyone in the audience. My name is Lonnie Edgar. As Senator Boyd said, I am the Deputy Director of the PEER Committee, but one of the other things I serve in a kind of a concurrent capacity is I've recently been selected as the Staff Vice Chair of the National Conference of State Legislatures. So with all that being said, I'm very pleased that I've got some partnerships with me. They're waiting for you on the Zoom. So I'm not going to actually go over a lot of this information. I'm going to go through it quickly and get to our stars of the show. But I'm joined virtually by Jenna Brannon and Eric Mayo, who's Associate Director and Senior Policy Specialist respectively. And so they're really going to give you a couple quick snippets of what other states are doing as far as specific bills. You all are the policymakers. You all are the ones that get to make the action happen. And so I'm just going to kind of quickly show you kind of what other states are doing and then jump to our guest from Kentucky, Representative Heverin, who's going to actually show you what they've done in Kentucky, especially teeing up off the conversations on how you involve the private sector in business. So just to kind of give you an idea, there's lots of different packets we have before you. Our slides. One of the things we do for all of you as legislators is we also serve as your research staff. So if you ever have a question or anything of interest, please let us know. Senator Robinson requested on behalf of this group a memorandum that kind of like summarizes a lot of the stuff you'll see on these slides today about state actions. That has been, approved by her to give out to you all. So if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know. The last two pieces of information you will have here are going to be the slides from NCSL as well as Representative Heverin. And so I will jump right into it. So we've kind of already talked about like why it's important. It's expensive. The access is not really there. A lot of people leave the workforce. Kind of what we like to say in program evaluation is the so what. You've already heard about the affordability issues, the accessibility and the quality issues. You can look at that on the slides if you like. But this is kind of really what it talks about the impact. I was glad that Dr. Allgood referenced the number from the Annie E. Casey Foundation about how the workforce participation and the childcare needs have driven basically about $122 billion out of the economy. So that's really kind of like a big ticket. You heard also about how every 1% increase in the workforce generates about $1-2 billion in Mississippi that Biz mentioned from the state economist. So again, it matters. Every person in the workforce does contribute to the economy. So what are other states doing to kind of just, take a look at these childcare issues in their states? Really, there's 4 areas we've seen a lot of traction in over the last couple of years. Increase in state funding support, tax credit programs, modifications to the block grant programs, although listening to Bob and Dr. Allgood, it seems like that's pretty much set in stone here in Mississippi for now. And then the last thing is what we're really going to highlight with you with our guest speakers is that creation of pilot programs. Some states have done some interesting things to kind of really involve the private sector. So this is just kind of a quick snapshot. This is not an exhaustive list. This was asked us and started as a research request. It's really targeted states of Virginia, North Carolina, and a few other areas. But we tried to kind of like expand that search to just kind of show you, are there any states out there that are really expanding state funding and things like that? You see there's kind of a little bit of, variety in the states that are actually doing this. For example, we've got our next door neighbor, Alabama, who's trying to do things to increase that funding regarding like paying for children, coaching and things like that. And of course, California and a few other states. So very different ends of the spectrum. They're all trying to work towards the same goal. I think that's really the clear message. One thing that has been also looked at widely from all the states, as you can see by all the different colors on that screen, maybe a little bit hard to read from the gallery. But the main thing to note is in that green color, that's where Mississippi currently sits, and that is going to be a tax credit benefit directly to the employer. There's anywhere from about 25 to 28, 29 states that are doing some kind of tax credit that goes to the dependent. So all that to say is there's a lot of different models that you can look at. And again, especially to you all committee members, if there's any particular state that you have information that you'd like to see, let us know. We'd be happy to pull that. As far as modifications to the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program, you see a little bit of traction here. For some reason, it looks like there's a lot of work going on across the Canadian border up there, if you see the top line. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on the northern states there, but they're very interested in looking at that. Most recently, I believe Arkansas has also done a little bit of stuff in basically increasing the number of slots for their program and things like that. So this is really what I kind of want to highlight before I pass it off to NCSL and Representative Hebron from Kentucky. There's been a growing number of pilot programs among the states that are looking at really including that employer. And it's kind of been commonly called tri-share. So you're really trying to, have that partnership with that state, that federal, and that private funding. A couple of just quick program snippets. You've seen Colorado and their employer-based childcare grant. Massachusetts did the early education and care staff pilot. And then I'm not going to talk about Kentucky a lot because you've got the one representative who helped create their program that's about to present to you all next. But Kentucky and North Carolina have really been the most recent and kind of forefront people in getting that program started. So rather than take questions, if we could just transition over to our Zoom panel and get the PDF pulled up. I'm here as a resource for you all, and I'm happy to look into any state or any program further on behalf of the committee.
Thank you, Lonnie. I'm going to go ahead and jump. And Lonnie, we welcome you as our staff chair at NCSL. Thank you for the invitation today. I want to thank you to Senator Boyd and Senator Sparks for inviting us to present today. My name is Jenna Bannon, and I am the Associate Director of the Children and Families Program at the National Conference of State Legislatures. I have been working in early childhood policy for 30 years. I have also been a preschool teacher. I am really honored to join you today, and we commend you for having this important conversation. As you know, NCSL is a nonpartisan organization that serves every state legislature in the nation, and we are here to provide you with a bird's eye view on what is happening across the country on this issue. We're going to go quickly, but today we want to try to begin to answer a couple of questions for you. Why is there a childcare shortage? What are the impacts of that shortage? And most importantly, what solutions are other state legislatures testing out as they address what is truly a national crisis? We also have Representative Hebron from Kentucky with us as well, who will be talking about their tri-shared childcare program with their business community. So before we begin, there's a lot of information covered in this presentation, and we have a short amount of time to present it. I'm assuming that you have the presentation in front of you. But consider this an introduction. We would be happy to work with this study group and provide you with additional information, or any individual legislators who would like to reach out to us for more information. And before I hand this over to my colleague, Eric, I want to clarify that we use the language of childcare and early care and education interchangeably. We also call it ECE in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jenna said, my name is Eric Mayo. I'm the Senior Policy Associate at the National Conference of State Legislatures, focusing on childcare policy. I want to start by answering the first question that Jenna posed, which is why are we seeing childcare shortages across the country? And it's a complicated question, but we can really boil it down to a fairly simple answer, which is supply and demand. The supply of childcare was really impacted by COVID. A lot of states, as centers closed and early child professionals left the industry, it was harder and harder for there to be a supply of childcare, while the demand remained strong. Parents still needed a place to drop their young children off, a place to look after their children as they worked. These two factors have led to less early childhood professionals and more expensive childcare throughout the country. So, and I think one of the big factors in that is this idea of workforce, which I know has been talked a little about earlier, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into. The graphic here shows the loss of the childcare workforce in Mississippi from 2018 to 2022. And this is compounded by the fact that the median salary for a childcare professional in Mississippi is about $10.60 per hour. The childcare workforce is 6.4 times more likely to live in poverty than elementary and middle school teachers. And you can see that that's causing many early childhood professionals to look outside the childcare center, outside the childcare sector for work, thus making it harder for childcare owners to keep their classrooms open. And Jenna will go into a little bit more detail about this later on what states are doing specifically to help with the childcare workforce. In addition to the workforce, there are unique economic challenges to running a childcare business. And you heard from childcare owners earlier about their individual struggles on what it meant to keep their centers open. It takes a lot of resources to develop the quality care our youngest learners need to succeed. Studies show that these investments can pay off in the long term, but it does not create a strong profit margin in the short term for providers. What this means is that there's rising expenses to run that childcare, and that additional cost often falls on the shoulders of parents. As you can see from this chart, the cost of care can range pretty significantly depending on where you live and how old the child is. What we do know is that federal guidance suggests the cost of care should never be more than 7% of a family's income. In many places, the cost of care is far beyond that. These studies reinforce sort of what you've already heard today. The availability of childcare impacts the maternal workforce, and when there are more childcare options available, it does allow women to succeed in the workforce. This graph you saw earlier from Ms. Harris at the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance, but I think again it's worth re-emphasizing. When mothers of older children tend to be more in the labor force because school is a place where they can drop their children off. Mothers of younger parents are less likely to have that place. That 22.8% difference you see at the far right end of the graph that was measured in June 23 is that's the third largest gap in the nation between the labor force participation rate for mothers of young children and mothers of old children. That's behind Connecticut and Missouri. And finally, before we go into sort of solutions, just wanted to leave you with this graph, which is a survey of parents done by the organization Ready Nation last year. And even if a mother is in the workforce, right, the lack of childcare or the lack of consistent childcare can still lead to issues, right? We have here parents who are saying they have to leave work early. They have to miss days of work. They were distracted at work because of their childcare issues. This is a real issue that parents are facing, and even if they're in the workforce, it's something they're still struggling with on a regular basis. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenna, who will talk a little bit about the solutions we're seeing around the country, and talk with Rep. Heverin about all the amazing work she's done in Kentucky. Jenna, turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Eric. Let's talk about state legislative policy trends that we're seeing across the country. Eric, if you can go back one slide, that would be great. And so our team has spent a great deal of time analyzing childcare legislation, and we've broken it down into these 6 categories. I'm going to dive into each of these categories for you. First and foremost, legislatures are really looking at how to support the early childhood workforce. As you have heard throughout the day, your childcare workforce is really struggling with low wages and a lack of healthcare. Also, for those of you who are parents in the room, spending a day with 1 2-year-old isn't easy. Imagine spending a day with 15. Being a preschool teacher for me was the hardest job I've ever had, and I had a master's degree. At the time, I made $12 an hour. So legislatures are exploring ways to address wages by providing supplemental income supports for early care and education professionals. For example, Tennessee is going to establish a compensation scale, and the District of Columbia has created a program for early educators to have pay parity with preschool teachers working within their public schools. States are also providing healthcare benefits, especially for childcare workers. And Kentucky has led the way in providing childcare subsidies to anyone who works in a childcare center or home. And I have a feeling your next speaker, Representative Heverin, had something to do with that. That policy now is being piloted in 9 other states. States are also creating scholarship programs and loan forgiveness programs to assist ECE professionals in getting credentials and higher education. And next slide, Eric. And they're also really beginning to address the needs of home-based childcare programs. So as a quick reminder, childcare takes place in multiple settings, and most often are small women-owned businesses. You all have licensed childcare centers that serve higher numbers of children, and those can be privately run centers or nonprofit centers such as Head Start programs. You all also have licensed family childcare programs that are run out of homes. And we also have what we call FFN care, or family, friend, and neighbor care. This care is often not licensed, but many families use this form of care across the country. So legislatures are trying to make it easier to provide home-based family childcare through things like allowing renters to administer childcare in their home, or preventing homeowner associations from prohibiting care in their neighborhoods. I'm going to jump to the issue of childcare during non-traditional hours. Parents with non-traditional work schedules often struggle to find childcare that meets their needs, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And especially in Jackson and Memphis, they have two of the highest percentages of night shift workers in the country. North Dakota and Illinois are providing grants to childcare programs that provide non-traditional care, especially for first responders, third shift workers, and others who need care outside of the traditional workday. I also want you to keep in mind infant and toddler care. This is often the most difficult care for new parents to find. Infant and toddler care is very expensive, and states are providing grants to infant and toddler programs and are looking at how infant and toddler care is paid for at the market rate. Moving on to the very big topic of childcare financing. Legislatures are responding to the childcare crisis by stepping into the childcare funding space through multiple avenues of financing, including using general funds, bonds, land trusts, sin taxes on gaming, marijuana, tobacco, and increasing taxes, and also tax credits. This is a huge list, and I'm not going to cover all of these examples, but I do want to highlight your neighbor in Alabama. They passed House Bill 358, which would create 2 tax credits to incentivize childcare, one for businesses who build or expand childcare facilities, and one for childcare providers themselves. In closing, I'm going to quickly mention that states are also trying to address the issue of childcare affordability. Historically, the cost of childcare has fallen onto parents and families, but over the course of time, state legislatures are beginning to step in and play a role in addressing the issue of affordability. They're doing things like increasing eligibility for childcare subsidies while decreasing co-payments for families. As Eric mentioned, federal requirements are now expecting that parents do not pay more than 7% of their income for childcare. Also, tax credits are another policy option for addressing affordability. The blue states in this map all provide the child and dependent care tax credit. And you'll see on the slide, there's a lot more information inside of it. And with that, I'm paying close attention to time. I'm going to mention that the TRI-SHARE model is being piloted in multiple states across the country. And we're really grateful to have Representative Hevron to talk about their innovative work in Kentucky. Rep. Hevron, take it away.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm honored to be part of the conversation. I do apologize. I have a golden retriever named Rosie, and she hates Zoom calls. So she has peanut butter. So hopefully she is content for the next 30 minutes. Always very embarrassing, but I like to give the disclaimer. So I am State Representative Samara Heverin from Kentucky. I represent the 18th District, which is a very rural part of Kentucky, but I also have one of the largest investments in Kentucky, which is Blue Oval SK, which is the partnership between Ford and SK Innovation. So they're making electric batteries. So that's part of my rural district that's turning into very much an urban area. But I also chair the Kentucky House, a Representatives Committee, Families and Children. And it's been a great honor doing so. I've been the chair for 2 years. And so it's something that is near and dear to my heart. So anyways, I'm very grateful to be here today. So I think the big thing, let's go ahead and get started. If you'll go to the next slide. So how did I get here? I don't have, I'll give the disclaimer, I do not have children. I'm one of the youngest members of my caucus. I think when I was elected, I was 27. So I always say this is kind of a generational conversation. But I'm older now, and so I'm no longer the youngest. But I think, this is something that would affect me, but it affects a lot of my constituents, my friends. And so just recognizing this is a huge workforce issue. And so probably it was during the COVID-19 pandemic is when I really started trying to figure out what were some workforce barriers that we had. Because anytime I would go to Walmart or Dollar General, I would always have constituents come up complaining, saying, well, people aren't going back to work because of stimulus payments, or people aren't going back to work because of unemployment insurance checks that they're receiving. And I just felt like there was a lot more than that. And I know that during COVID, a lot of women left the workforce. And so how did we start looking at that to really try to figure out workforce? Because that's one of the big issues why I ran. Kentucky has one of the lowest workforce participation rates in the United States. We're at about 57.7%, and the US is at 62.7%. And so that's how I got involved in childcare. And I wanted to try to figure out what was an out of the box thinking. And in government, we generally don't like out of the box thinking, but I wanted to find a way to get the private sector involved. I knew that this was going to be a looming crisis. Probably not, I didn't realize how big it was going to be, but I knew that this was going to be something that we had to really think on. And, the private sector is the one that needs the workers. And so how do they put some skin in the game to help solve this? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over several key pieces of legislation that we passed, and then I'll open up for questions. And so if you all have more interest in learning about House Bill 499, the tri-share model, I'm definitely happy to share that. There were 2 big pieces of legislation passed in 2022. So this will be the 2025 session will be my 4th year working on childcare legislation. So in 2022, Senator Carroll, he is my counterpart in the Senate. He passed a bill that would create the Early Childhood Education Task Force. So I'm assuming, much like you all, taking time to really look at early childhood education in Kentucky and seeing what we could do better. And then I passed House Bill 499, which is the Employer Child Care Assistance Program. And it's a workforce development program that allows employers to partner with states to help reduce out-of-pocket childcare costs. And especially, I feel like in Kentucky, we have CCAP, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's Child Care Assistance Program. And I feel like that really helps our low-income families. But as you all know, with inflation, our middle-income families are really struggling. Mortgage payments and childcare payments are about the same here. And so how do we help our middle-income families struggling? And so how I always explain this is, say you as an employer, you decide you want to offer $500 to your employee. As long as your employee makes less than the state median income, which is about $65,000 here in Kentucky, the state will match that dollar for dollar. So that would be $1,000 going into a childcare center. And so you've got as an employer, you have skin in the game. The state's helping that incentivize that. And then it's going directly to the childcare industry because they're really struggling. And so that's the tri-share model that we talk about. Now, specifically, 25% of those funds in the original legislation had to go towards a small business, because a lot of the legislators came to me and said, hey, I'm a small business owner. We want to make sure that we have a level playing field. We want to be involved in this too. And so we made sure that a percentage of the money would actually go to small businesses. If you want to do the next one. So I'll be really quick on this. So here's what we found for the findings and recommendations, things that we've already been working on. Childcare deserts exist across the Commonwealth. In Kentucky, we have 120 counties, but 50 counties are considered to have childcare deserts, meaning they have little to no childcare opportunities for their people. There are 5 pillars to early childhood education. I talk about that a lot here in Kentucky. I think this is a cohesive, it's a really big ecosystem. And so how do we get all these things to be cohesive? So that includes the HANDS program in Kentucky, early childhood education, First Steps, early Head Start, pre-kindergarten, and independent childcare providers. In Kentucky, there are roughly 2 job openings for every individual seeking a job. CCAP, which is the Kentucky Child Care Assistance Program, is a key tool in early childhood education funding. And then House Bill 499 was the pilot program. So in 2022, it was a pilot program. In 2024, we made it official into legislation. And so it was no longer a pilot program, which I think that will explain our numbers. I'm happy to talk about that a little more in a minute. But then childcare worker shortages lead to a lack of adequate childcare in Kentucky. And so the recommendations are things that we've worked on: increasing childcare and quality for working families by supporting employer engagement in childcare solutions, utilizing CCAP for childcare workers, expanding capacity for Head Start and early Head Start and other public-private partnerships, looking at wages for child care workers, encouraging Kentucky League of Cities and Kentucky Association of Counties to look at their zoning and land use regulations, and then also raising awareness to child care owners about tax incentives and all the different incentives that we offer as a state. Because when I was talking to child care providers, they had no idea the benefits. And so making sure that they were educated on that. Next. So in 2023, of course, we had to go back. As I'm sure you all know, when you pass legislation, it's never perfect. So you continue to go back and make changes. And so what we did is we required the cabinet to give reporting for everything to the Kentucky General Assembly. We really appreciate reports coming to us from the executive branch, just so we can get an idea of if the policy decisions we're making are actually helpful, and numbers for that. And it also allowed a child care provider to terminate an active contract, which previously they were not allowed to. And then for the 2024 session, I passed House Bill 561, which created the Certified Child Care Community Designation Program. And so what I've realized is that we can do all these things at the state level, but unless we educate our counterparts in local governments, we're still going to struggle. And so this was a way for economic development, and also just to educate, we have magistrates at the county level and the county judge executive, mayors and city council. And so making sure that they know what's going on, and that whenever they're trying to bring economic development opportunities, but they're also concerned about their workforce, they can work to create that. And so that the reason for this was to look at the land use and zoning policies that they have implemented. Or is it local government that's been an impediment to creating childcare opportunities? Is it $400 for a license? That's a lot of money. So just going back through and looking at that. And then we also passed House Bill 179, which is paid family leave insurance. And so I feel like this is a really big part that's important in this. This was NCOIL model legislation. So it was legislation that's already passed several states. But I think a big part of the childcare issue is that this allows, with paid family leave, it allows parents to remain in the workforce and ensure newborns get great care and bonding time. This reduces the strain on the childcare sector. Caring for newborns is very expensive and difficult for childcare providers. So more access to paid family leave in the end actually really helps. And to me, it allows it strengthens families. And I think that's why we're all here, is allowing that additional bonding time with moms and fathers if that's what they decide. But this was voluntary. It's not a mandate or anything like that, but it opens up in Kentucky. We had to open up the insurance market. And so the legislation does that. And so I look forward to seeing how that helps our childcare ecosystem for the years to come. And then for the funding, so two things of note. First off, so we are working to lower the state income tax in Kentucky. So tax credits really aren't an option for us right now, as we're trying to make sure that we meet our deadlines and our hard numbers to be able to continue to decrease that state income tax. And Kentucky also doesn't want to subsidize childcare. So we did not continue the sustainability payments that the federal government had brought down. And so that's been very difficult. It's been a difficult conversation for us in Kentucky. So we were looking in our budget to make sure to make some really strategic investments. So we maintained high reimbursements for childcare providers that serve low-income families, continue allowing childcare teachers to receive free childcare, which is critical for supporting childcare workforce. Even if you're getting paid low wages, if you can get free childcare, that makes the world of difference. Continuing the employer child care assistance program, helping low-income families receive child care subsidies to overcome the benefits cliff. That's a huge conversation here in Kentucky, as we're trying to get families off government assistance, but also recognizing that there's a benefits cliff. And so it prevents families from doing that. So being aware of that. Early childhood development scholarships, and then new innovations in early childhood to support initiatives like on-site employer-based childcare. So honorable mentions for Kentucky, we had the Family Child Care Startup Grant, which was put in the budget, CCAP eligibility for childcare workers, which Jenna had mentioned, early childhood education scholarships, and increasing the income eligibility thresholds for CCAP to 85% SMI by using existing funds to maintain the threshold. Now, something that the federal government has put down is that we're going to have to start giving money for enrollment versus attendance. So currently we reimburse by, and I think most states do this, I don't know if Mississippi is different. We've always reimbursed by attendance. And so now it's going to be enrollment. So that should also help childcare workers. And then future thoughts for Kentucky. So having regional studies or task force options. So right now, my area development district in Kentucky is actually having a big childcare task force. And I think that's fantastic. We're getting more at the lower levels to be able to talk about how it really affects people. And so I think if we can have more conversations like that, not directed by the government, but having local groups get together, it also engages a lot of the local industry, which is so important. On-site childcare centers at industrial parks. I think that would be a really great concept for Kentucky. In Kentucky, I see Toyota's on the Zoom. In Kentucky, we have a great Toyota plant in Georgetown, and they actually have on-site childcare. And I think a lot of businesses are really concerned about liability, so they don't want childcare centers in their locations. And so if we could take away that liability from them and be able, if you put each employer puts in, $10,000 for a childcare facility, that would be able to make it seem more attainable. It's a great benefit for their workers. So that's kind of a hope. Removing school district barriers for childcare. That's another incentive for being a teacher and being in public education. The STARS evaluation. So we are currently doing that right now, reevaluating our quality care system to make sure that you don't have, you're not paying for quality, that you're able to achieve it, whether you're at a high income or low income place. Entrepreneurial moms. I laugh at this. But I think that a lot of women, whenever they stay home, and men too, but when they stay home and take care of their kids, when you've been in the out of the workforce for 5 or 6 years, it seems like a lot of life has passed by. And so I think that if we can look at that market and say, okay, moms, you can raise your kids, you're the CEO of your household, you can do childcare. And so being able to do business coaching, teaching them, how to do budgets, marketing, anything like that. That's something I really want to focus on. And then ratios, our ratios in Kentucky, no one wants to talk about them. And so kind of having that conversation gently, but also after school programs. What are the regulations around those? And making sure that they're being utilized properly around Kentucky. And then most importantly, what's going on is we have a Kentucky collaborative on childcare put on by the Kentucky State Chamber. And basically, in Kentucky, no one's been able to pinpoint to me in 3 years what actually needs to happen. And so this is about a 30 to 40 group stakeholder, or a stakeholder, 30 to 40 stakeholder group. And they are of all different beliefs. They believe that child care should have all the funding, and they think that child care should have zero funding. And so being able to get all those people together, kind of get the legislators out of the room so they maybe feel more at ease to talk. But I'm so excited to see how that actually turns out. It just started earlier this fall, and so it's going to be about a year process. But what I've asked them is to come to me with something that they feel like we can do for Kentucky childcare. So getting some stakeholder groups, I think, is the most important thing because they know better than we do about how this actually operates on the ground. Policy discussions moving forward. So childcare versus early childhood education, to me, those are two separate things. And so what does that actually look like in this space? What is government's role in childcare? You know, I believe that we should not subsidize childcare because I can think of 1,000 other industries in Kentucky that would love to have subsidies as well to pay their employers higher wages. And so it's really difficult to pick and choose. And so what does that look like? What exactly does the childcare industry need? Getting everyone on the same page is the most important thing for me right now. Childcare versus universal pre-K. I remember being somewhere and a preschool teacher stopped me and she was just wearing me out. And she was like, why don't you support universal pre-K? And I was like, I never said I didn't. I just have a lot of questions. And so they're continuously talking about it. And the childcare owner comes up. He's like, well, do you want us to go bankrupt? And, you know, you're always grateful for people that kind of come in and chime in during tough conversations. And the woman was like, excuse me? And he said, you know, we get the most money out of infants. And we get the most money out of infants, but our ratios are different for 3 and 4-year-olds. So that's how we're able to sustain childcare is that, you know, and if you take our 3 and 4-year-olds away, it changes our model. And it was just such an interesting conversation because both of them want what's best for 3 and 4-year-olds. But what does that look like? And I don't have the answer for that. But I think recognizing both of those is important. And then state policy versus federal policy. Of course, you know, if the feds are going to come down, you know, kind of like the enrollment versus attendance, that changes things. But, you know, kind of figuring out what those look like at the federal level and the state level for us. And then that's the end of my presentation. There's my email if anyone has any questions, but I would be happy to take any questions now if that's appropriate.
All right. Well, thank you to Representative Heavrin and to your Golden Retriever for beaming in from Kentucky to today. I really appreciate your time. So as we close, we want to just give you a few key takeaways. Mississippi, you are not alone in this conversation. State legislatures are grappling with this issue across the country. There's a really important role for state legislatures to play in addressing the childcare crisis. And there is also a role for local government and for communities. We are seeing collaboration happening across states and localities to creatively address this crisis. And as a closing reminder, you know this, but quality childcare impacts both child development and economic development. It is a win-win for states. So in closing, we want to thank you so much for inviting us to present to your committee. NCSL has policy resources and experts that can support your work on this issue. I would especially encourage you to check out our early childhood database, which has both pending and inactive childcare legislation going back many, many years. We are happy to answer any questions you may have. We realize that our time is over and the day is late for you all, and I hear that your room is quite warm as well. So please let us know what you need from us. Thank you again.
We want to thank you so much for joining us today. Representative Heavrin, it is, we have many, many things in common right now that we're looking at in Mississippi. And I want to thank Representative Robinson for helping us today work with that. We are going to have our committee go ahead and we're going to call, and Representative Hebron, we will be in touch on a couple of things here, but we have some out of town guests. And so I'm going to keep us moving today, but thank y'all so much. And we really appreciate what y'all are doing. And we look forward to talking with you about what's going on, particular things in Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
Thank you.
Well, our next guest has been teed up as Representative Hebron talked about entrepreneurial mothers. And so I think we're getting our next speaker. We have Louis Piccone, who is the Senior Vice President of Wonder School, that is going to be here with us today. This was a program that they mentioned earlier that was came through during the pandemic with ARPA funds. And it's a really great story, of which now I believe y'all have, they are calling the Mississippi model in this. So we look forward to hearing about you and this program. It's very exciting what you're doing in this field.
Turn it on. There we go. Now we're good. I want to start by saying thank you, Senator Boyd, Senator Sparks, for the invitation. We are very grateful to be here. Also, want to say thank you and say a lot of gratitude for the partnership that we've had with MDHS, Director Anderson. Our work together, working with Dr. Elgood, has really helped propel us forward in the work we're doing in Mississippi. Let me give a little bit of background very quickly about Wonder School. The mission of our company is that we strive to create childcare within 5 minutes of every family's home. But we take a unique approach in how we do it. We focus ourselves on technology innovation, economic sustainability, and best business practices. We try to apply those across everything that we do. We've had a good bit of success doing that. If you look at our footprint across the country, a couple states that come to mind, Idaho and Missouri, both states where we have created significant amounts of new childcare providers. And I'll talk about our methodology for doing that in a moment. In Indiana and in Florida, we are the childcare marketplace. So the online childcare finder where parents can come to find childcare, providers can come to market their services. The work we've done in Mississippi can really be grouped into 3 buckets. The first bucket is creating new childcare providers. The second bucket is helping to sustain and improve the business practices of existing childcare providers. And the third bucket is running a substitute teacher pool. You heard Dr. Allgood mention that a few minutes ago. And when he said, we were on the phone and I said, we need a substitute teacher pool. And somebody said, we don't do that. I was that somebody. And he said, you'll figure it out. And we certainly did with their partnership. So a little bit about the first area of work that we've done. When we come in and we are looking to create new childcare providers, we take a little bit of a unique approach. We come in and we create profiles for people that we think would be great at running an early childcare business, people to become entrepreneurs. So when we're doing this, we're actually recruiting and supporting entrepreneurs to go out into the state and start their own businesses. We recruit to those profiles. We have an entire team of people that recruit. They recruit with going to events. They do a lot of work online through social media. You may have seen some of our billboards around the state, but we're constantly trying to bring people into the funnel in an organized way to begin to approach childcare as a career. Once that happens, we enroll them in Wonder School Academy, where they get business training and childcare training. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. We give them a lot of business planning. In other words, if you come and you start a business with us, you're going to walk away with a business plan, a marketing plan, a rationale for what your pricing is and why it should be that. We have a business systems that help you operate your business. So we will help you implement systems to manage your enrollments, to do your billing, to communicate with parents, all these things that help to make a really sharp and effective small business. And we will support you going through the licensure process because we know that's difficult for a lot of people. And in the end, we will stay with you for 2 years because we know everything I just said, people don't learn overnight. So we have some really great examples of success across the state. Right here, you have Cassandra Woods out of Tupelo, Mississippi. What's interesting about Cassandra, she was a former educator that wanted to start her own business. Absolutely one of the profiles we were recruiting to. We have Kelly Wallace. what's interesting about Kelly, beyond having a great early childcare business, is that she's now automating all of her billing. So instead of waiting for checks at the end of the week from parents, at the end of the month from parents, she has all of that automated. And if you know small businesses, you know cash flow is king. And so the results of our creation of new childcare programs, if you look as of July 29th, we had 96 new childcare programs with 3,334 childcare slots created. We have another 85 potential childcare programs that are in licensure. I think by the time we're done, we'll probably have about 5,000 to 5,500 new childcare slots. Right now, we estimate the economic impact to GDP to be about $44 million. The second area where we did a lot of work was helping to sustain and improve the business practices of providers. What we did, a big part of Brian's team, was business planning, business supporting, how do you pick high quality staff, how do you build a marketing plan, analyzing your profitability, risk analysis, all these things that you would do to start a really great small business. We've had a lot of very positive feedback on that. I'll let you read this offline, but very positive testimonials. And our results, we were brought in to work with 50 businesses. We worked with 52, and we think the overall economic impact is about $23 million. The third area where we're doing work, maybe one of the most interesting areas, thanks to Dr. Allgood, was creating a substitute teacher pool. When we came in and looked at the substitute teacher pools around the country, we quickly realized that one of the core problems was that there were not enough substitutes on the pool. So we started recruiting. What you see here is one of our billboards. There were, I think, 6 of them around the state. We built profiles. We recruited the profiles. Before you know it, we had everybody in training, business training, and some provider training, did background checks in partnership with the state, and then we had an online matching platform. We had a lot of success around the state, all different areas of the state, providing substitutes. Very positive feedback from the providers that were receiving substitutes. And the results, we had about an 88% match rate, which given the market where the match rate's about 30 to 40%, we were doubling that. You can see across the state, we had an impact in virtually every corner of the state. And going forward, we'd like to continue to serve Mississippi, doing all the things that I've just talked about, plus adding a teacher recruitment platform. Brian and I are happy to answer any questions you have.
I got to ask a lot of questions yesterday, so I'm going to let some of the other people, if y'all have questions, go ahead and ask questions. Senator Parker.
So in this new startups, how dependent are they on the revenue and the other funding from our partners at Executive Anderson's office?
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm Brian, by the way. I'm the general manager for our Southeast. I do a lot of the actual operations with our teams here on the ground. I mean, it's like a lot of their track programs. Some of them are dependent upon some of the vouchers that are coming from the MDHS. But I think our focus is on the business practices. And so essentially what we want to make sure happens is they're operating both cost and revenue wise in a way that's as efficient as possible so that whatever resources that they do need to take is minimized and they can be successful without those particular assets at all times, and so I mean, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. A lot of the automatic billing is critical. You would be amazed by how many childcare programs are not actually getting their accounts payable fully paid by the parents. Like those kind of things where it's, if parents aren't paying, then of course there's going to be more substitutes, more subsidies that are needed. But parents are consistently paying, which a lot of times is just a matter of automatic billing, increases revenue, increases the cost, and lowers the cost. And so those are kind of things. So yes, it is because it's childcare, and childcare is expensive, but we try to focus on ways to minimize the need through business practices and business coaching.
So is that financial model, is that producing higher wages for the workers there? Or what is their average wage compared to other numbers you've heard maybe today?
Typically our providers are going to pay the typical wages for in the industry, but the benefit is because they're creating more profitability, they can. And so I think one of the things that we tend to coach on is staff turnover is extremely expensive. As you all know, when you're running a business, if you have to hire new people, it costs a lot of money. And so you might oftentimes be better paying off higher wages, but keeping those workers with your organization than having to constantly turn over. And so typically it will be with the average of the childcare because, you know, we have hundreds of providers, so it typically averages out to what the state is paying. But we do offer coaching like that, where in the case of like, hey, you might be better off paying higher because you're not gonna have people leaving constantly, having to shut down for days, having to not be able to like create that revenue for those particular days when the staff's not there.
Thank you.
Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one thing going forward, and it may be something to answer at a later time, but the fluidness of childcare, you know, we typically have talked a lot about, hey, 8 to 5 or 8 to 3, things of that nature. The shift work, are you seeing that this model that you're working with, where you can recruit people to unique hours, would be beneficial, where people are seeking out, you know, I hate to use the example, but it's like a Uber. I need a ride to the airport for a 4 a.m. flight, or it's late at night. But interestingly enough, if we can match the need in a particular area where there is a third shift, is that something you guys believe you could attack directly?
We think at this point, we have like built up enough of a pipeline and enough of an understanding of how childcare is working in Mississippi to begin to recruit more specifically for businesses to do those things. I think that is kind of the next phase of what we would like to do.
Yeah, and I think I'd also say, like, one of the things that we're most proud of our skill sets is, you know, a lot of the places that we recruit, a lot of places to work at is like, you know, it's rural Mississippi. It's not always just like in the metro areas. You know, we specialize in saying like, we're not just going to say like, yeah, we can get a bunch of providers here in Jackson because there's a bunch of people here. You know, we reach out. And so I think the same thing with like, you know, timestamps around like, oh, we need night work, we need night shifts, you know, especially with our substitute pool, like either day or night, you know, like those are essentially the similar to like the fluidity of it. It's like those are people that come in for the day, work, they have a job, we're creating revenue, they're creating wages, and they're also like not, you know, obligated to necessarily do that every single day. So a lot of the profiles that we'll have are, you know, mothers whose children are now going to school, and so they have time during the day, or former educators, retirees who still love children and want to work with children, but aren't necessarily like wanting to do that full time. And so we really hone in the work that we do for the regions and the needs that are there. And we spend a lot of time iterating to make sure that it fits those needs, you know, wherever we're working.
I know that one of the things you did is you literally help people get new licenses, but then you also helped people upskill too. Can you tell us a little bit more about helping those women upskill?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really goes back to our business sustainability work, you know, because I think what we tend to find, and this is not universal, what we tend to find is that people are amazing childcare educators and childcare providers, but they're not necessarily the amazing business owners. And so when we talk about upskilling, it's talking about, like, I just talked about staff turnover. If you ask most people that, like, you know how much it's costing you that you have to bring in new staff every single, like, it's usually 3 to 4 times as expensive to bring in new staff as it is to retain staff, if not more. And it's those types of things that are just, you know, like, it's not a matter of competency, it's a matter of just not knowing. Like, you know, they need to be educated on those things. And so talk about upskilling. Our program is very tailored toward that, towards saying like, what's your business plan? Like, what are your current margins? Like, what's your staff turnover look like? What does your marketing plan look like? And a lot of times it's like they have bits and pieces, but they need the cohesive step-to-step guide to say like, here's how you're going to create profitability sustainably over time by making sure you're at full enrollment through marketing, by making sure your staff's not turning over, by doing all these different things that you do, you know, but you don't really have the full piece guide yet, you know? So that's what we do. And that's how we kind of help with the upskilling side of things to make sure that they have those competencies to run the business.
Any additional questions? Thank y'all so much. This is great information, and thank for the work y'all have been doing. Thank you. All right, we have one last presenter, and I think they're zooming in with us.
I do believe our presenter with Toyota, Mariah Sweeney, and I believe others, and on behalf of, I guess, Senator McMahon as well, since this is in his backyard and in our area with the Blue Springs facility.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Sparks, and members of the committee. My name is Eric Skaggs. I'm the president of Toyota Motor Manufacturing Mississippi up here in Blue Springs, Mississippi. And today I'm joined by my colleagues Mariah Sweeney and Tiffany Hedden, who will help me present to you about our efforts for childcare here at Toyota. But before Mariah jumps in, I just wanted to start us off today and share with you, not only as a president of Toyota, Mississippi, but also as a parent and user of Toyota's childcare services. I was able to experience this actually, my previous role, I was actually in Kentucky as early as 1993 when daycare, childcare started there. And I had 2 twin girls and was able to take them from their infant stage, one in each hand into the child care center there on site at the Toyota facility. And just the benefit of that was a tremendous benefit. And I really wanted to share that. So anytime that I've been able to weigh in on our efforts for having childcare here in Mississippi, it's very easy for me to advocate and support. That is an investment that we want to make for our employees here for the long term. And so with that said, I just wanted to share that perspective and get us kicked off. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over to Mariah Sweeney, who will walk us through our detailed presentation today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for being here today. My name is Mariah Sweeney. I'm the group manager for People and Property Services, and childcare is one of the areas that I manage for all of our campuses across the U.S. I am also, similar to Eric, I'm also benefited from Toyota's childcare programs. I have 2 boys that both attended the childcare centers in Kentucky when they were little. One's now in college and one's a junior in high school. But I also took advantage of some of the other services that we offer in terms of College Coach and helping my oldest to get into college and figure out how we were going to pay for it and all of that. And our special needs care for my youngest was diagnosed with dyslexia. And so the special needs care helped with figuring out how do I advocate for him at the schools and different things like that. And then when he was in middle school, he was diagnosed with cancer. And so figuring out how to work with the schools and what resources are available and different things like that were key to helping us to survive that. And so all of the entire suite of services has been beneficial for me. And I'm really proud to be representing Toyota on that topic. So for today, we're going to talk about the background of Toyota's investment in childcare, talk about workforce investment because it's more than just an employee amenity, it's a necessity in our mind. We're going to explain a little bit more about what we're doing in Mississippi with our new childcare center, and then we'll talk briefly about advocacy efforts. So Toyota's philosophy on childcare, it's more than a one-size-fits-all solution, right? It's more than just providing an on-site facility for our employees. We have to meet them where they're at and provide resources for their unique needs. So that's why we offer the entire suite of services that we do. But we do believe it's a workforce investment, both for our current workforce who need safe, quality, close-to-home solution for their childcare, but also for that next generation who are going to attend our center and begin their journey of early learning and development. So when we look at, childcare, we look at actually family support services is what we call it. And we offer things all across the board. So it could be on-site childcare centers, which we do have. It could be babysitters or nannies and helping people find access to that. It can be helping with college admissions or special needs support. We have lots of tutoring and learning support needs that are available. We have backup childcare or emergency backup childcare where we provide 15 days a year to each team member, where if something goes wrong in their regular childcare program, you know, there's a holiday at school or the water main breaks or there's a snow day or something else, and they need help finding childcare, we'll help them find either an in-center care or a provider that'll come to their home, and we'll pay for the majority of that cost. They pay a small copay, but we'll pay for the majority of it. You can also take those days if maybe you don't need childcare, you could turn them in for extra tutoring support or pet care. So for our team members that don't have kids, we're supporting them from a pet care perspective. And you can also use that support to help care for elderly family members if they needed something. Maybe somebody had surgery and needs somebody to sit with them or drive them to a doctor's appointment or something like that. So we try to look at it as an entire suite of services and to meet people wherever they're at, whether they've got infants or they've got college kids or they're trying to take care of their elderly family members. We want to support them however we can. So when I look at the background, really our first on-site childcare center was in Kentucky. It was established back in 1993 and just celebrated our 30th year. Our Indiana site followed in 2003. And then Mississippi, we're excited to open in the fall of 2025. It'll be our third center. North Carolina is also opening in the fall of 2025 to be our fourth center. And then there's a few more that are in the works that we haven't announced yet, but we're really excited to continue to expand our on-site childcare options. So we do look at childcare as more than just an employee amenity. For our current workforce, it's really a key component to help make their lives easier, right? When they come to work, they don't have to stress about where's my kids going to be at, who's taking care of them, are they safe, are they learning something, are they being fed? This is something that they really need and they can't do without. From our future workforce perspective, we're truly investing in the future, right? These are the kids that are coming to our centers, they're beginning their development. I think you've all heard before that early childhood learning is the most important time. That's when the kids are developing the most. And so we're helping to make sure that that's happening. And together, we think that we can make the shift from daycare to early learning education and developing that more robust workforce. So this is a picture. It's a sneak preview of what our center is going to look like. This is on our campus in Blue Springs. And it's just it's not attached to the plant, but it is on the property just to the north. So very excited about it and look forward to it opening next year. So this picture over here to the left right now, this is actually was taken this week. So we've got progress happening and hoping to see some of the building going up very soon. From a capacity perspective, we do expect to support around 119 students per shift. So you can see it's ages infant all the way up through school age and how many classrooms that we have. We do operate 24 hours a day. So I know earlier somebody mentioned talking about shift work. Shift work is one of the biggest challenges that we face. Our day shift works 6:30 to 3:15 and night shift is 6:30 to 5:15. They do 4/10s. And then we sometimes have overtime or we have production Saturdays or different things like that. So the key thing with our on-site centers is that they're open anytime that we're producing vehicles. So that means overall the shifts, they're there for, if you rotate shifts, they're there for our contractors as well. We're available anytime that the plant is open. From a center accreditation perspective, we do intend for our center to be NAEYC accredited. It's one of the highest accreditations that you can get. It does take a couple years to get it. So once the center's open, we're operating it with the intent to achieve that accreditation. And we'll go through that process. Some of the key features of our center, we do have a Movement Matters room. That's basically an indoor gym space where if the weather's bad, kids can still get in there, run around. It helps with their gross motor. They'll have equipment in there, playground equipment that is great for inside that they can play on, little obstacle courses and things like that. We will have a STEAM lab, which is a great space for them to explore and play and learn so that they can, try stuff out and see how things move or how things happen for the STEAM areas. We have several outdoor play areas with age-appropriate equipment for all of them. And then we do have a commercial kitchen that Aramark, who is our food service provider at the plant, will be running and providing the food for the students. Company investment, childcare, on-site childcare specifically is absolutely a big investment. For the building, it's a multi-million-dollar capital investment to build it. We do work with Bright Horizons for the Mississippi Center. They also run our Kentucky and Indiana centers. Toyota does pay some operating costs, anything that's not covered by tuition. So our team members are expected to pay tuition, but we try to keep it lower. And we make sure that it's on par with the market average. Childcare is considered an ERISA benefit, so it's important to make sure that we're not causing any tax issues for them. But anything that's not covered by their tuition, Toyota pays for. We do work to make sure we have competitive teacher wages and benefits, and they do tuition reimbursement for teachers if they want to get further education and go for degrees or different things like that. From a credentials perspective, in order to be NAEYC certified, you do have to ensure that 51% of your teachers possess a CDA, and we provide incentives from a pay perspective, as well as some other bonus features to reward teachers who go and get the different accreditations or degrees. From an advocacy perspective, this is kind of the final component of our approach. So Tiffany Hedden is our corporate communications manager at Toyota, Mississippi. She does lead those efforts for boots on the ground at the plant and is involved with the partners that are listed here in various capacities as we help to further develop our early learning opportunities in our region and in our state. So we're trying to approach things from all angles. I think that's the key points. So if you have any questions, Eric, myself, or Tiffany are all available for any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the work that you're doing and bringing this here. I know Mr. Waller's been here with us all day, and one of the things that we want to try to do across the state is do this to scale where we can. And so we thank you for leading the innovation in that manner and being a model for us. Any questions from the committee? Senator McMahon?
Thank you. So Tiffany does a really good job about keeping us updated what's going on at Toyota, but would you find that it's made you more competitive if you're in a competitive situation with some of the other manufacturers in the area and the wages are nearly the same, that childcare has put you in a position to attract and retain some employees or put you at that competitive advantage?
I think it absolutely affects it. You see it, especially like on social media and different things. People are talking about their childcare and where are they going, and somebody will say, "Oh, I'm at the Toyota Center, and let me tell you how great it is." And so that word of mouth gets out there. We do have data on how long team members tend to stay if they've been part of our childcare program, and we see that they have a longer retention rate if they stick around for our Indiana and Kentucky sites. If they're part of those programs, they stay a little bit longer. So that helps as well. So yeah, I do believe we see that.
Do you
Agreed, Mariah. And then locally here, you know, in Mississippi, it's been a exciting opportunity for other companies to benchmark with us. Ingalls have come up in Corinth. We've had Caterpillar, and then also down toward the Jackson area, we've hosted Chevron as well. They're all very curious. We all want to find solutions. And it does seem sometimes insurmountable, but we've been able to open up our doors and share with them, you know, our methodology behind it. So that they can have some of that, because especially for those younger years, right, that infant to toddler, that care is very essential and it is very hard to come by. And so we would have moms and dads saying, "I will leave my current job right now if I could come to work there, earn the same wage or greater with great benefits and also solid, reliable, quality care for my child." So yes, Senator McMahon, it is enhancing recruitment, although really, you know, for us, it's kind of a win-win all around. We're helping support our communities and our families, but then also to get more team members to come and stay with us and be part of our family.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you. Appreciate y'all's commitment to Mississippi and to the making our community stronger. I know y'all do a lot of community work as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Boyd?
Thank y'all for the work that y'all are doing in the area, but thank everybody for a very long, busy afternoon. I think we all feel like we've been drinking from the fire hose right now. So thank you very much. And we appreciate everybody who stuck with us. So thank y'all. Report.